Chapter 1. Do I know you? Have we met before? I turned to the kid behind the counter in the ice cream shop. Sweet Scoops, a charming store with pink-painted walls and a ceiling border of smiling ice cream cones. I don't think so, I said, glancing over at my boyfriend Jordan, who studied the candy display. This is my first time in town. He wasn't a kid, but a young man. Sitting firmly in my mid-50s and quickly creeping towards 60, everyone under the age of 30 resembled a child to me. Narrowing his gaze, he ran a hand through his mop of brown hair. No, I know you from somewhere. I'm not sure where, but I'll figure it out. He studied the phone in his hand. A quick peek revealed he was scrolling Instagram. With a shrug, I continued my internal debate. What type of ice cream cone did I want? Chocolate chip? Peanut butter and chocolate? Both? People thinking they knew me happened quite frequently. You look like that one actress, he said. I glanced up and noted his name tag read Milo. Andie MacDowell? I smiled. With my curly black and gray hair, I'd been compared to her throughout my career. No, he said, shaking his head, then he snapped his finger. That one actress on that soap opera. What was her name? The character was Cassie. The statement had caught Jordan's attention, and he hurried over to my side. It hadn't been that long ago I'd fallen from the Hollywood elite, and I'd been terrified anyone would recognize me. In fact, I'd left Hollywood and ended up in Haywood, Arizona, a small town in the Arizona mountains. I dropped my screen name, Samantha Rathbone, and went by Sam Jones. I'd gone from a life of ritzy parties, living in a multi-million-dollar mansion and driving fancy cars, to a one-bedroom apartment above an herbal apothecary. After the shock of my downfall wore off, my life had changed for the better. Except you look older than her, Milo continued. Yes, I heard that a lot as well. While in Hollywood and working on my show, as the years turn, my producers had insisted I pump my face full of Botox and fillers. Over the years, I'd let go of that practice, and now I aged naturally. Sometimes, I didn't like what I saw in the mirror, but since I'd left Hollywood, I didn't have much time to obsess over my looks. I pondered whether to admit that I indeed was the famous Samantha Rathbone, or just let him think I resembled her. I decided to order my ice cream cone instead. I'll have a peanut butter and chocolate on a waffle cone, please, I said. Do you want sprinkles? No thanks. Just the ice cream is great. I turned to my boyfriend. What are you having? Not sure, he said. But whatever I get, I'm having sprinkles. He winked, reminding me a lot of George Clooney with his salt and pepper hair, defined jawline and twinkling eyes. While Milo scooped my sweet treat, he said, I was dating this girl for a while and she loved that soap opera. She used to record it every day, then watch it after work. She was obsessed with Cassie on the show. He shook his head. That character was a murderer, but she always said that Cassie only killed when someone messed with her, or they were doing something to someone she cared about. And she got away with it all the time. He wasn't wrong. My character had been a truly horrible person, but she did kill only when she felt someone had been unjust to her, or those in her inner circle. The amount of fan mail I'd received had surprised me, but the public loved Cassie. I'd probably still be playing her today if my husband hadn't stolen money from the Hollywood elite and then gotten himself murdered for it. The awful situation had led to me being blacklisted, fired from my job, and me leaving Hollywood. Well, that's the thing about television, I said. It doesn't mirror real life. True that, Milo said. He stared at me just a beat too long, and I realized he was still trying to figure out if I really was who he thought, except older. Yeah, my girlfriend loved that show. She said Cassie changed her life, and she stopped watching when the character wasn't on it any longer. Good. Not that I'd ever go back to Hollywood even if they begged me, but I relished the thought of the ratings plummeting because I was no longer a part of the show. What's she watching now? I asked, making conversation. When she broke up with me, she was watching reruns of that stupid show. She ruined my life. He handed me the cone, deep sadness radiating from his gaze, and then glanced at Jordan. Do you want something? Poor Milo. He seemed heartbroken over his girlfriend moving on. Such a shame. As Jordan placed his order, a scoop of chocolate and a scoop of vanilla with sprinkles, I turned to stare out the window of sweet scoops in the little town of Cottonwood, Colorado, while enjoying my treat. Nestled at the base of the Rocky Mountains, Cottonwood could be described as quaint. It had once been a mining town, but was now a tourist attraction. The main street was only about a mile long, but was filled with antique stores, wineries and restaurants, and a lot of tourists frequenting them all. My former life as a Hollywood actress had taken me all over the world: Paris, London, Dubai. I'd been on African safaris, skied the Swiss Alps, and seen the northern lights in Iceland. But I'd never experienced the United States between California and New York. And that's what Jordan and I had decided to do. I wanted to see new things, meet different people, and have real American experiences. That didn't mean we wouldn't see the beaches of Mexico or walk the streets of Malta during our travels, but I was excited for the plans we had in the U.S. We'd arrived in Cottonwood the prior day and had visited 2 wineries, then done a little shopping. I made a mental note to drop into the bookstore down the street, but we hadn't had time to go into. After our ice cream cone, we were headed to the 3rd winery, the one I found most interesting. It was owned by the lead singer of a popular death metal band, and I found the odd dichotomy of a metalhead making fine wine intriguing. It was my understanding that when the band wasn't on tour, the owner spent a lot of time at his wineries, and I hoped to meet him. "Ready to go, Sam?" Jordan asked. "I knew it," Milo shouted, slapping his hand against the top of the ice cream display case. "I knew it was you. You're Samantha Rathbone." Turning to Jordan, I shot him a glare, then I smiled at Milo. "You got me." His grin slowly faded. "Why would you lie to me like that?" "I didn't lie to you," I said. "You didn't tell me who you were," he shouted. I took a step away from the counter, shocked by his outburst. He pulled his hair through his hand again and stared at me. "Do you know how many episodes of that crazy soap opera I had to watch? She would make me sit next to her every single night, and we couldn't even consider another show until she'd finished it. And then she made me watch the reruns after you left the show. Over and over. Samantha Rathbone. The character Cassie. Samantha. Cassie." He threw his head back and screamed. "Listen, buddy," Jordan said, stepping between me and the counter. He'd been a cop for many years before retiring, and he'd never lose his protective instinct where I was concerned. After fending for myself for most of my life, I found it endearing and appreciated it. It's not a big deal. Now you know that she's Samantha Rathbone. Lying would have meant her saying she was someone else. She didn't do that. She simply didn't confirm your suspicions, but I wouldn't have either with that comment on her appearance. He fished out his wallet from his back pocket. "Instead of having a fit, why don't you tell me how much I owe?" Milo narrowed his gaze at me as he muttered Jordan the total. Jordan threw a few bills on the counter. "Keep the change, Milo, and have a nice day." He eyed him warily over his shoulder as we walked to the door. "Nice job blowing my cover by saying my name," I said once we were outside. Jordan held the door for a woman with brown hair and grinned before answering. Once she was inside, he said, "Yeah, that was a rookie mistake." He shook his head. "I really messed up. Sorry about that." I linked my free arm with his. "Why do you think he got so upset?" "His reaction was a little over the top," Jordan muttered. "The yelling and hitting the display case, unbelievable. It was like someone tried to hand him a fake $100 bill or lied to him about the moon existing. If that's his default personality, I guess we know why his girlfriend broke up with him." I stopped in front of a store featuring kitchen items, aptly named the Cozy Kitchen Cookery. The hand towels caught my attention. "Mi casa es su casa, but mi taco es mi taco," one of them read, and I burst out laughing. The towel translated to, "My house is your house, but my taco is my taco." Jordan chuckled next to me. You don't like to share tacos? Not in the least bit, I said, licking my ice cream. Me neither. Tacos aren't to be distributed once they sit on a plate in front of me. I gave him a quick kiss. Another thing we agree on. As we moseyed down the sidewalk, I quickly forgot Milo and concentrated on Jordan, the man with whom I'd fallen deeply in love. The fall sun hung low in the sky, while the chilled mountain air cleared my head and gently caressed my skin. We laughed and talked while window shopping until we'd finished our ice cream. Let's go to the bookstore, I said, pointing across the street to books in the nook. Jordan pulled out his phone and glanced at it. Our wine tour starts soon. How long do you think you'll be in there? I sighed, irritated that once again time had thwarted my visit, just as it had the previous day. Probably too long. We don't want to be late for the tour. But we'll go after, okay? He nodded, and we headed back up the street toward the winery. Not only was its owner unique, but so was the design. The large wooden building sat on top of a hill covered in grapevines. To reach the winery, we either had to take the stairs or the tram. What do you think? Jordan asked. We could take the stairs and make a dent in our calorie intake for the day, or take the tram? Glancing at the long, steep staircase, it didn't take me long to decide. I think between breakfast, lunch, our ice cream cone, and the wine we're about to drink, we'd have to run these stairs 400 times in order to get into a calorie deficit. So I'm voting for the tram. Good thinking, Jordan said. Wine doesn't pair well with cardio anyway. Chapter 2. After purchasing our tickets, we walked over to the open-air tram, and were greeted by a bubbly young woman who wore her blonde hair in 2 long braids down each side of her head. Her white teeth shone in the afternoon sun as she smiled. Large, dark sunglasses hid half her face, and they reminded me of the costume I used to don in Hollywood when I didn't want to be recognized while out and about. I'd also tuck my hair up into a baseball hat and wear sweats and a sweatshirt from Walmart. No one ever gave me a second glance. How are you today? She chirped. Very well, Jordan replied. He gripped the tram door, which upon further inspection, seemed to be a bit rusty. Is this thing going to keep me well, or break midway and drop us to a painful death? She giggled and her cheeks turned a darker shade of pink. Jordan had that effect on women. I think we'll be fine, sir. After you, my lady, Jordan said, touching the small of my back. I carefully stepped into the cage and took a seat. There was room enough for maybe 3 people, plus the woman with the braids. My name's Kate, she said, shutting the door after moving inside. I'm going to take you to the top. Welcome to the timeless vineyard. Thank you, Jordan and I said in unison. Where are you from? She turned to the console, pushed a button, and the tram lurched to life. The low screams of struggle from the pulley above didn't give me much faith we'd make it to the top. However, the fresh air moving through the grail-like sides felt good against my skin. But perhaps we should have taken the stairs. Arizona, I answered. How did you end up in Cottonwood? She asked. We're taking small-town USA vacations, I said. We want to see things between California and New York. That's a lot of space to cover, Kate said. I don't think we'll visit it all, I said. Personally, if I were going on vacation, I'd hit a white sandy beach somewhere warm. A girl after my own heart. Anyway, let me tell you about the winery. It's owned by a man named Harrison Chase and his wife Helen. They opened this particular winery. Wait a minute, I interrupted. I thought it was owned by that guy in the death metal band. He goes by Death Rock and his band is Vortex of, shoot. I can't remember the rest. Kate threw her head back and laughed. You're correct. The band name is Vortex of Decay. But I'm not allowed to say that part, because death metal scares some people. Death Rock is his stage name. His real name is Harrison Chase. Sounds like a banker's name. Jordan chuckled. Is he here right now? I asked. I'd love to meet him. Unfortunately, no. Mr. Chase is out on tour with Vortex of Decay and won't be back for another month. He's in constant contact with his wife, Helen, though. Our tram slowly moaned and groaned up the hill. Kate continued, but he opened this winery 5 years ago. He also owns 3 others across the state. These vines that you see on the hill are all for his white wine. The other winery down the road focuses on the red wines. I looked out the metal cage surrounded by green grapevines. Some were covered with white sunshades while others flourished with health. Will you be joining us for dinner, or just a tasting? Kate asked. Jordan and I traded glances. We have a tour, I said. And then? I don't know. What's the food like? Kate's eyes widened. The chef is amazing. She came out of some fancy 5-star restaurant in New York. You have to stay for dinner. It's totally delish, but not in a snobby 5-star restaurant in New York way. I smiled. Having been in the finest restaurants all over the world, sometimes, food was best prepared simply. That wasn't always the case in the upper echelon of restaurants. Did you make reservations for the tour? Kate asked. Jordan nodded. I read that it's often sold out, so I bought tickets before we left Arizona. Wonderful. You'll love it. Where the winery sits at the base of the Rocky Mountains, it provides the perfect climate to grow our grapes. As she dove into the humidity and wind drafts of the area, I tuned out and listened to the groaning tram. I stared ahead, glad to see the top of the hill within view. How long have you worked here? Jordan asked. 3 years, she replied. You must enjoy the whole winemaking process, I said. Kate shrugged. This is a pretty good job, but my true love is art. The problem is, it doesn't pay the bills. I'm sure you're quite talented, I said. I hated artists struggled in our world. Paintings, books and plays were some of the most important things in culture. They held up a mirror to society and showed us the rights and wrongs of our ways. Art provided entertainment and a way to escape. It shouldn't be so hard to make a living doing what one loved. Moments later, the tram stopped and Kate hit some more buttons. We've arrived. Once you leave me, you'll want to walk right through that door there. She pointed to a glass pane. I believe Penelope is doing the tours today, and she's so much fun. You'll have a blast. She opened the door and Jordan and I stepped out. As I took in the large building, I was shocked at its beauty. The view from the street didn't do it justice. Built to look like a log cabin with windowed walls, I was astounded at the finer details, like the beautiful hand-carved door handles and the dark oak floors. I stepped inside and turned toward the bar, taken aback by the beautiful views from our hilltop perch. Forests stretched for miles, peppered with yellow, orange, and red trees, showing off their fall beauty. Oh wow, Jordan said. This is sure a find. I nodded. Most of the booths in the restaurant area were full. Can I help you? I turned to the voice and smiled at the woman in her late 20s with short black hair and a flawless complexion that women in Hollywood spent thousands to achieve. We have a reservation for a tour. It's under Jordan Branson. Oh my gosh, she whispered, placing her hand over her mouth as she stared at me. It's you. Jordan cleared his throat as the woman's eyes grew wider. You're Samantha Rathbone, she said. I'm such a huge fan. Oh my word. What are you doing here? How is this happening to me? Her words spilled out so quickly, they ran together. Her cheeks turned fiery red, and I could see her pulse pounding beneath the smooth skin on her neck. It's nice to meet you. I held out my hand and read her name tag. Penelope. She slowly laid her palm in mine, as if she was afraid it would bite her fingers. Do you have a tour here? Today? I nodded as Jordan smirked. Oh my word. This is my lucky day. I'm scheduled to do the tours today. I'll take you into the VIP areas, where only staff is allowed. I released her hand. We don't want you to get into any trouble. Penelope shook her head. I won't. Please. Allow me to do this. I can't tell you what a difference your show and your character has made in my life. Jordan smiled. I don't see a problem seeing the inner workings of the winery. Do you, Sam? I shook my head, more concerned that my murderous character had affected her life in a good way. Thank goodness, Penelope whispered. Just let me get someone to cover the door, and we'll get started. I can't wait to show you around, Ms. Rathbone. As she hurried away, Jordan threw his arm over my shoulder. I'm feeling like a third wheel, he said quietly. I think Miss Penelope wants you all to herself. She's very excited, isn't she? Do you want me to wait for you at the bar, so she can fawn over the famous Samantha Rathbone in private? I elbowed him in the ribs as I giggled. Knock it off, Jordan. You're sounding petty and jealous. He laughed and kissed my cheek. Maybe I don't like sharing you. Do you think it's weird that she's the second person in town who recognized me, and the second person who has mentioned that Cassie changed her life? Jordan furrowed his brow, then nodded. You're right. I think we may have found Milo's ex-girlfriend. How crazy is that? I whispered, shaking my head. I know this is a small town, but this coincidence seems absurd. Penelope returned, her smile so wide it seemed her face may crack. Are you ready? She asked. Do you want to do the tour first, or have a wine flight? Let's do the tour, Jordan said. Let's taste the wine, I countered. Whatever the lady wants, the lady gets, Jordan said, chuckling. Great. Follow me to the bar. Penelope sat us at a table by the window. Let me get you each a flight, and I'll tell you about the wine. It wasn't until this trip that Jordan had heard of a wine flight, which was a sampling of the wines offered at the winery. It usually came with a booklet sharing a little about each of the offerings, such as the flavoring, and maybe a little history of the grapes it was made with. When Penelope returned, she carried 2 trays with 4 small glasses on each. She set them down and told us about the wine instead of giving us a book. As I listened intently, I was impressed with her knowledge. After she'd finished, she asked for some pictures. Of course, I said, standing. I wrapped my arm around her and smiled while she held her phone in front of us. A moment later, a woman walked over to our table and grinned. I pegged her to be in her mid-50s. This is my boss, Helen Chase, Penelope said. Ah, Harrison's wife, Jordan said. She nodded, pushing a lock of black hair behind her ear. Yes, you're correct. I heard we had a celebrity in our midst, and I wanted to introduce myself and thank you for joining us this afternoon. This place is amazing, I said. The decor is beautiful. So homey and cozy. Thank you for noticing, she beamed. Harrison and I have worked very hard on our little winery. She placed a bottle of wine on the table. I wanted to gift you this. It's our limited edition Merlot. Even though we specialize in Chardonnay here, I keep a couple of bottles of Merlot from our other wineries to share. Oh my, I said, taking the bottle and setting it on the table. How nice of you. Thanks. Maybe after your tour, I could get your autograph to display here? I chuckled, thinking how absurd the request seemed to me, but nodded. I'd be happy to sign something. If you'd like a picture as well, we can do that. While reaching my hand out to shake hers, time seemed to stop. My fingers nicked the bottle I'd just been given, sending it to the floor. I reached for it, but it slipped right past my palm. As it shattered, I gasped, horrified. Helen screamed as Penelope jumped out of the way. What have you done? Helen yelled. It's okay, Penelope said. Let me grab a mop and broom. I'm so sorry, I whispered. I'm such a klutz. It's fine, Jordan said. He reached down and grabbed a couple of large pieces of glass. Helen took a deep breath, then smiled. You're right. Everything is fine. It's only one of our more expensive bottles. The sarcasm dripping in her voice indicated that the situation was certainly not fine. She squatted and began picking up glass while I fought back tears. I'm sorry, I said again, unsure of what else to say. I also dropped to my knees to help. A moment later, Penelope returned. I've got this, she chirped. And Helen, you have a phone call. Helen stood and nodded. I'll leave you to it. And Penelope. I need to speak with you after Ms. Rathbone and her guest have left. The two women grinned at each other, but I noted a bit of hesitation in Penelope's eyes. I hoped there wasn't any conflict between her and her boss. Helen had stepped in the red wine and had tracked footprints across the floor as she left, but I didn't say anything. I was in enough trouble. Jordan snapped a picture of the disaster. What are you doing? I asked. I wanted to document America's clumsiest actress' latest mess, he replied, chuckling. Penelope also laughed. It's okay, Ms. Rathbone. Truly it is. Let me mop this up and we'll get on with the tour. I felt a little better about things, but I still was mortified that I'd sent a bottle of exclusive wine to the floor. A few moments later, we stood by the front counter, and Penelope showed us the collection of all the wines offered. I noted Helen opened a door at the end of the hall and quickly closed it behind her. I turned my attention back to the floor-to-ceiling wooden racks and marveled at all the wine produced. The tour continued, and I was surprised that our last stop was through the door Helen had gone through. This is the coolest part of the winery to me, Penelope said as she swung open the panel to reveal a set of stairs leading downward. It's kind of creepy down here, but I love it. Jordan and I descended the dark staircase, and I heard the door shut behind us. A small light came on above, illuminating the stairs. What we'd find at the bottom was still a mystery to me. At the landing, the air smelled earth-like and a bit mildewy. A specific scent caught my attention, but I wasn't sure what it could be. What's that smell, Penelope? That's the smell of the oak barrels, she replied, flicking on the lights. This is where they're stored. Isn't it cool? Wooden barrels lined the wall, laid one on top of the other on their sides all the way to the ceiling, looking as if they'd roll off each other with one strong push. We ventured farther into the basement. Those over there are getting ready to be used during the next harvest, she said, pointing at a few standing upright. The quiet of the room encased us, and it felt like a spooky yet magical place. I wandered over to the stack of unused barrels and stared up at them, leaving Jordan on the other side of the big room. Penelope followed me. It's been so nice meeting you, she said softly. Your show was great, and it gave me the confidence to leave my boyfriend. Would that happen to be Milo? I asked, glancing down at the ground where I found a purple fingernail. Noting the intricate gold design, I figured someone would be angry their manicure had been ruined. Penelope narrowed her gaze. How did you know? We met him, and he mentioned his girlfriend loved the show. I just put two and two together, because there's no way there would be so many people enjoying as the years turn in such a small town. Hey Sam, Jordan called. Come over here and look at this. It looks like someone carved into this wooden pole. Wait until you see the artwork. I smiled at the guide, then turned and walked toward Jordan. A sudden rumbling sound came from behind me, then a loud crash. With a scream, I ran toward Jordan, who was reaching his arms out toward me, his face twisted in utter horror. Seconds later, the sound stopped, and I fell into Jordan's arms. We both glanced behind me to see the barrels that had sat so precariously had indeed fallen and landed on Penelope. Chapter 3. I heard yelling from upstairs as I stared at her lifeless body. Part of the pyramid of barrels remained intact, and I glanced at the top, almost expecting to see someone standing there with breath heaving from the exertion of pushing the casks. Jordan raced over to Penelope and fell to his knees next to her, placing his hand on her neck. After a moment he stood, shook his head and pulled out his phone. Let's get upstairs and call the police. I don't have service down here. Tears welled in my eyes as I tried to calm my racing heart. My feet were heavy as I walked across the basement. The poor girl. Just as we reached the bottom of the stairwell, the door above swung open and Helen stared down at us. Call the police, Jordan yelled. Tell them we need an ambulance as well. There's been a terrible accident. What happened? Helen asked. I heard a loud noise coming from down here. The barrels fell, I replied, Penelope is dead. She gasped, then pulled out her cell phone. Once the call had been placed, she ran down the stairs. What happened? She asked again, staring at the scene. How did the barrels fall? I shrugged. They just came down. That's impossible. Helen shrieked, stepping farther into the basement. They can't just come rolling down without being pushed. Jordan and I exchanged glances. Why do you say that? Jordan asked. It's the way they're stacked, Helen said. They're strapped down. There's no way for them to move unless they're freed and pushed. We stack them and tie them down to avoid this exact scenario. Were we in the middle of a murder scene instead of a horrible accident? Oh my word, she whispered, staring at Penelope. This is just horrible. Stay away from that area, Jordan ordered, then turned his back to her. I don't like this, he whispered. It sounds like a murder. I nodded. But who would want to murder Penelope? She seemed like such a sweet girl. Jordan glanced over his shoulder as Helen began to weep. I don't know. Sirens sounded in the distance, and moments later, police pounded down the stairs followed by the EMTs. Jordan and I moved to the side of the staircase. Unfortunately, both of us were much too familiar with murder scene procedures, and we knew the best thing to do was stay out of the way. Behind us was pitch black, and I wondered if the area led anywhere else within the winery. We stood quietly as the EMTs did their best to revive Penelope, but Jordan whispered, It's hopeless. Just let the poor girl be. After a moment, I turned to the darkness, having the feeling someone was staring at me, but concluded it was my imagination. I couldn't look as they lifted Penelope onto the gurney. As they hauled her up the stairs, I kept my gaze firmly on the floor. My name's Sheriff Michaels. I glanced up to find one of the cops standing in front of us. I understand you two were here when the barrels came down. Yes, Jordan replied. This is Sam Jones, and my name's Jordan Branson. We're here to help, Detective. He hiked up his pants over his protruding belly. I don't think you're going to be much help, except to tell me what happened. Well, I used to be in your shoes both in Chicago and Arizona, Jordan replied. I've got numerous murder investigations under my belt, and so does Sam. Michaels arched a fuzzy gray eyebrow while meeting my stare and removing his cowboy hat. You? Did you used to be a cop too? I shook my head while my stomach rolled. Swallowing hard, I hoped I didn't lose my wine flight all over the sheriff's boots. She's got a real talent for solving cases, Jordan said. Helen came racing down the stairs. I hadn't even noticed her leaving the basement. This wasn't an accident, she repeated. I'm telling you, Sheriff, those barrels were tied down. Someone unstrapped them and pushed them. Well now, Helen, let's take a hot minute and hear what these two have to say, Michael said. Maybe it's best if we all head up and get out of the way. Forensics should be here soon, and we want to preserve the crime scene as much as we can. I followed Helen and the sheriff up the stairs with Jordan at my back. About halfway up, I took a deep breath, grateful for the fresh air. Once upstairs, Sheriff Michaels asked, Helen, where can I take these two for a private chat? We've cleared the restaurant and bar. Still would like a place where I can talk to them without any ears around, Helen. With a sigh she said, my office. Follow me. She showed us to a small room with a desk and 2 chairs. Pictures of green vineyards lined the warm brown walls. Overall, it was quite cozy. With a grunt, Sheriff Michaels sat behind the desk while Jordan and I each took a chair. Helen shut the door behind her when she left. Now, why don't you two tell me why in tarnation you were down in the basement, which I happen to know is off limits to customers? I bit my lip, hoping to hide my smile. I hadn't heard anyone use tarnation in ages. The last time was probably in an old western on late-night television during one of my insomnia episodes. We were on a tour, Jordan said. Penelope brought us down there and told us that the boss had given her permission to do so. And did you check with Helen about that? The sheriff leaned forward and pulled out a small notebook from his back pocket. As he opened it and grabbed a pen from the desk, Jordan shook his head. Why would we do that? She said she had permission, and we believed her. Michaels grumbled as he wrote his notes, but I couldn't make out what he said. I glanced at Jordan, now irritated. Excuse me? I said you shouldn't have been down there, he said loudly. Helen never allows anyone but employees in the basement. How were we supposed to know that? I shot back. And we met Helen before the tour. She didn't say anything about us staying away from the basement. We'll see what she says about that, Michaels grumbled. What happened down there? I cleared my throat and hoped to keep my frustration at bay. I was more than familiar with small-town cops. They could be quite condescending, and oftentimes just plain stupid. Jordan was the exception to this rule, and I chalked that up to him being a Chicago cop for so many years before landing in Haywood. She showed us the casks, I replied. We were looking around the room. Suddenly, I heard a rumble, and the next thing we knew, Penelope had been hit by the barrels and died. Was anyone else down there with you? No, Jordan said. I furrowed my brow as I recalled the space behind the staircase. It would be a perfect place for someone to hide. And you didn't know Penelope before today? I wouldn't even say we knew her today, I said. We had just met her not even a half hour before the tour started. So you don't know who would want to hurt her? Of course not, Jordan said. How in the world would that be common knowledge? What about Milo? I blurted. Silence fell over the room while both men stared at me. He said she'd ruined his life and frankly, he seemed a little unstable. Why do you say that? Michaels asked. And where can I find this Milo character? I sighed, hating that I'd thrown the guy under the proverbial bus. I should have given it more thought before speaking. We got an ice cream cone before we came here, I said. Milo discovered that I used to be on a soap opera that his girlfriend Penelope made him watch. He was very angry with me because I didn't admit who I was right away. Ah, so we've got some big Hollywood star in our midst, the sheriff said, rolling his eyes. How about that? It's been a few years since I've been on television. A little respect would be nice, Jordan grumbled. We're here to help, Sheriff. Again, not sure how you're going to do that. He cleared his throat and glanced down at his notes. Now tell me about this Milo character. What do you know about him? He serves ice cream at Sweet Scoops, I replied. He once dated Penelope. That's all we know. I feel as if there is more, Ms. Jones. With a sigh, I threw up my hands, my face hot with anger. Who in the world did this guy think he was? We just arrived in town yesterday, Sheriff. That's truly all I know about Milo. I can't even give you his last name. I'm not a mind reader. You said he seemed unstable. He did, Jordan agreed. I noted his tone conveyed calmness and confidence, while I seemed closing to reaching full hysteria. He reached over and grabbed my hand, giving it a quick, reassuring squeeze, which helped calm my fury. If you don't have any other questions for us right now, we'd like to return to the hotel. The sheriff stared at Jordan for a long moment, but my boyfriend didn't flinch. He held his gaze. Where are you staying? Michaels grumbled. We're at the boutique hotel across the street. I replied. The Quaint Corner. That's the expensive one in town, the sheriff said. Not that I'd expect anything less from a celebrity. I shot to my feet. If I didn't leave, I'd say something I'd regret. I'd worked hard for my money, and yes, I had plenty of it. That's why Jordan and I were able to travel and see new places, experience new things. However, I hadn't expected to be harassed by the police when we'd rolled into Cottonwood. Jordan stood and placed his arm around my shoulders. If you need anything else, you know where to find us. We left the office and walked through the now empty winery. Plates and wine glasses littered the tables. Funny how murder could clear a room almost faster than a fire. Once outside, we found Kate standing by the tram. As I approached her, I took in her red-rimmed eyes. What are you still doing here? I asked, laying my hand on her shoulder. I thought Helen had told everyone to go home. I can't believe Penelope is dead, she whispered, then fell into my arms. As I hugged the woman, I glanced up at Jordan. Were you two good friends? Jordan asked. She shook her head. Not really. After pulling away, she glanced at the winery door, then whispered. I think Penelope was going to get fired today. Chapter 4. Why do you think that? I asked. She was stealing from Helen and had been for a while. Helen finally found out. I arched an eyebrow, my heart thundering with excitement. Had we just discovered a motive for the murder? What was she stealing? Wine? Money? Both, I think. Why don't we head down the hill, and you can tell us more about it, Jordan said. She nodded and opened the tram door. We all stepped inside, and Kate remained silent until the winery was out of view. How did you know Penelope was stealing? He asked. I wasn't sure at first, but weird stuff happened. Like tips would be there one minute, then gone the next. Inventory would be off. The only thing every single incident had in common was Penelope being on shift. She sniffed and glanced around as if making sure no one saw her speaking. Did you tell Helen your suspicions? I asked. No way. I didn't like the fact Penelope may be stealing the tips, but I'd never say anything. I wasn't certain. I didn't want to get her in trouble. I just noticed that things started disappearing when she was around. How do you know Helen and Harrison found out about Penelope stealing, if you didn't tell them? I asked. I heard Helen on the phone with her husband, she said. He was on speakerphone. They were talking about how they needed to get rid of her. I would think they'd fire her before murdering her, I said. One process is legal, the other is not. Kate shook her head. I agree with you, but we aren't dealing with nice people. Why do you say that? I asked. Both of them, Helen and Harrison, are horrible. They always play nice in public, but behind closed doors they're awful. Especially to us employees. They're condescending and rude. I hadn't given more than a compulsory glimpse at Harrison Chase, aka Death Rock's history, when I found out the band leader owned the winery, but now my curiosity was piqued. I'd do a deep dive when we got back to the hotel. I've never been this close to a murder, Kate said. Gosh, this is so upsetting. How I wished I could say the same. Murder seemed to follow me wherever I went. I'd been involved in many murder investigations, and I'd had a lot on the line. People I cared for had been accused of murder, as had I. It had been a scary time, with a crooked sheriff in charge in Haywood, Arizona. I glanced at Kate's hands, and noticed she wore a pair of black gloves. Had she had them on when we'd arrived? Are you suggesting that your bosses killed Penelope for stealing from them? Jordan asked. Kate shrugged and pursed her lips, remaining quiet the rest of the ride. Jordan gave me a side eye, and I knew he had a lot to say about this horrible situation we'd found ourselves in. It was difficult to make the leap that Helen had murdered Penelope because she caught her stealing, but people had killed for less. And here we are, she said as we reached the bottom. I know you both were excited when you arrived, and I'm sorry the afternoon was ruined. With the sun setting soon, a chill hung in the air, and goosebumps trailed over my arms. I glanced at her gloves again. Were they really necessary? It didn't seem to be that cold. Thanks for the ride, I said, running my hands up and down my arms. I'm really sorry about Penelope. Me too. Have a good evening. Jordan and I hurried across the street to our hotel, which, I had to admit, was absolutely stunning. The hallway leading to our room was done in rich, warm browns and taupe colors. Art hung in bronze frames on the walls, while the muted lighting gave the area a warm, cozy feeling. I'd studied the modern pieces upon arriving and marveled at the talent. Now I barely gazed at them as we rushed to our room. Jordan opened the door and I stepped in. After he shut it, we stared at each other for a long moment. Then I sighed and sat on the edge of the bed. I don't like the way the sheriff was talking to us. Me neither. Who do you think killed her? I shrugged and kicked off my shoes. Okay, well, let's go over what we know. Helen went down into that basement while we were there, I said. I never saw her return upstairs. But she was upstairs when the murder happened, Jordan said. So we must have missed her. Was she? I stared at the carpet, remembering the place under the stairwell. It would have been a perfect hiding area. After explaining my thoughts to Jordan, I said, for all we know, there's a secret door back there that leads out of the basement. I never considered that, he replied, sitting at the desk. Good observation. Anything else you noticed? A purple fingernail. There was a purple fingernail with intricate gold design in the basement. I saw it just before Penelope was killed. We sat in silence for a long moment. Did you happen to notice anyone with fingernails matching that one? He asked. I shook my head. Who knows how long it had been there? It could have been weeks or months old. It may not be a clue. We can't discount it though. I flopped back on the mattress and stared at the ceiling. Our room was decorated similarly to the hallway, but instead of bronze frames on the artwork, ours was black. The lovely black and taupe silk duvet felt soft against my palms as I ran my hands over it. I found the gentle fabric soothing to touch and calming to my shattered nerves. Jordan cleared his throat. You know, there was something else I was considering, but I'm hesitant to bring it up. Why? He sighed. It's not a pleasant thought. Just tell me. He took a deep breath, then said, what if those barrels weren't meant for Penelope? My heart stuttered in my chest, and I quickly sat up. What do you mean? What if you were the intended victim? You're joking, right? No. Why would anyone want to kill me? I shrieked. Well, you did break a limited edition bottle of wine, and you got Milo all worked up at the ice cream shop. You think Helen tried to kill me because I broke the wine bottle? The very special limited edition wine bottle that made one heck of a mess, Sam. It's just a thought. I gripped the duvet, my eyes wide. I'd never considered that I may have been the target. But the motive would be completely insane. Who would kill someone over a bottle and a mess? Or a silly argument? If you think Milo was trying to kill me because of our little dust-up in the ice cream store, how did he get into the winery? And why didn't we see him? I don't know. Just spitballing ideas. If he was dating Penelope while she worked there, I'm sure he spent some time in the winery. And if your idea is right about a door under the stairs where people can come and go from the basement without being noticed, then maybe he had access to it. Oh my word, I whispered. Jordan, that changes everything. I know. I shot to my feet and began to pace, wiping my shaky hands on the front of my skirt. If you're right, then that means Penelope died because of me. I don't know if I can live with that. Hey Sam? Jordan stood and placed his hands on my shoulders. He smiled as his gaze caressed my face, and I felt as if his stare touched my soul. Take some deep breaths. I'm not saying that is the case, and this is exactly why I didn't want to bring it up. I'm saying it was a scenario that crossed my mind. He was right, of course. I was jumping way ahead of where I needed to be. Okay. We must focus on finding the killer, but let's keep that motive in mind. Both Helen and Milo were very angry with me today. It's a stretch, but if either of them is mentally unstable, it's a good possibility. Well, Milo kind of proved that he's a bit of a hothead, and Helen, well, her outburst was a bit out of line. And we know Helen was also angry at Penelope, he replied. If she was stealing, she may have had some other issues in her life. We just need to do a little digging. Of course. I took a deep breath and calmed my racing thoughts. If you're right and those barrels were supposed to hit me, I'm afraid the killer may try to strike again. Jordan took me into an embrace. No need to worry about that. They have to get through me first. A long moment passed as I rested my head against his chest, my panic now fully diminished. Let's go have a glass of wine on the deck, he whispered into my hair. We should catch the last of the sunset over the mountains. After grabbing 2 glasses and the bottle the hotel had provided in our room, we moved out the sliding door where 2 yellow tamarack chairs and a matching table sat. Jordan had been right. The sky was filled with gorgeous shades of pinks, purples, and blues. That's one pretty sunset, he said, pouring us each a glass. Almost as pretty as you, Sam. I smiled, appreciating the compliment, although I had my doubts I could compete with the beauty in the sky. Since leaving Hollywood, one thing I'd learned to value was nature. I never had time for sunsets, studying the colors of the turning leaves during the fall or stopping to listen to a river, until I moved to Haywood. Even though my life had been turned upside down, it had settled me and made me realize that some of the most important things in life were simple and available right outside my front door. Wait a minute, Jordan mumbled. Look over there. Our patio overlooked part of the main street of Cottonwood, including the ice cream shop Sweet Scoops. As darkness descended, we could see inside. Isn't that Kate? He asked, pointing. I pushed my glasses up my nose and squinted. The young woman standing at the counter had 2 long blonde braids. She stared at Milo, both of them very serious. We watched for a few minutes and no ice cream changed hands. Milo's head hung, and he brought his hands to his face. Kate rushed behind the counter and took him into an embrace. They stood in each other's arms for a long while. Is he crying? I asked. It sure looks like it. Poor guy. She must have just told him about Penelope. As we sipped our wine, we stared at the 2. Milo pulled away and retrieved some napkins, then wiped his face. Kate held his hands in hers as they talked. I wish I knew what they were saying, I whispered. Me too. Before Kate left, she planted a small kiss on Milo's cheek. A smile played on her lips as she walked out of the ice cream shop, and I met Jordan's gaze. I didn't know they were so close, I said. Me neither. Kate didn't mention it at all, did she? No, but we also didn't ask. Let's consider another scenario for a moment, Jordan said. Kate's got the hots for old Milo there. I nodded. But Milo is still hung up on Penelope. Is there a better way to get to Milo than to remove the obstacle? I winced. Not a stellar choice of words, Jordan, but if she got rid of Penelope, she'd be able to swoop in and comfort Milo. Then possibly become the object of his affection. Exactly. Chapter 5. Throughout all the murder investigations in which I'd participated, one thing had become quite clear. Once I got past the initial shock of the horrible death, my brain switched gears, and I became a reluctant bloodhound in search of the truth. Unwilling, because I really didn't want to be involved, but in every case, it became a necessity. If Jordan was right and someone was coming after me, I would be sure to find them and serve them to the police before they had the chance to finish me off. After tossing and turning all night, I came up with a plan of action. My first stop would be to interview Milo. Then, I wanted access to the murder scene so I could get a closer look at the area under the stairs. Finally, I had some questions for Kate. While attempting to tame my mess of curls in the bathroom mirror the next morning, Jordan returned with some coffee from the cafe and the local paper. I didn't trust in-room coffee makers, no matter how many stars the hotel boasted. I'd watched too many YouTube videos of the horrible things people did to the coffee makers and how they were rarely, if ever, cleaned. I asked around in the cafe, and I think it would be a good idea for us to visit Penelope's roommate. He handed me my coffee. I took the cup and set down the brush. Roommate? Yes. She lived a couple of miles out of town in a house she shared with a woman named Greta. You've been busy. It didn't surprise me people offered Jordan information so freely. He really did remind everyone of George Clooney, especially when he wanted to be charming. A small smile, a twinkle in his eye, and a bad joke, and people fell under his spell. Especially women. I'd witnessed it many times. Heck, I'd fallen for it myself. Just trying to make myself useful, he said, shrugging. I think it's important to dig into her personal life. Maybe something there will shake loose a clue that could lead us to the killer. Why hadn't I considered where Penelope had lived, or her personal life? I'd been so focused on the suspects, I hadn't given much thought to her, which was dumb of me. Jordan was right. Becoming familiar with the victim was step one to getting this solved. "Your hair looks really nice," he said, then retreated from the bathroom and left me alone with my reflection. My hair looked like a ragged mess never to be tamed, but I'd take the compliment. I sipped my coffee as I worked on my mane. Finally, I gave up and tossed the brush in the sink. As anyone with naturally curly hair knows, some days are great, and other days there isn't a darn thing that can be done to tame the unruly chaos. I was experiencing the latter. "What time did you want to leave?" I asked, walking into the bedroom. "I'm ready whenever you are. Let me check my email and finish my coffee, then we can go." The prior night, I'd wanted to investigate Harrison and Helen a little more. Since he was somewhat famous, I figured there'd be some articles about him. Of course, the internet didn't disappoint. I found local pieces about the two opening their wineries, interviews with Harrison about the band, and a couple of salacious pieces written by a self-proclaimed groupie of Vortex of Decay and her interactions with the band members. If even half of what she said was true, I was surprised Helen had stayed with Harrison. One article did catch my eye. Written in a major music publication, I studied it carefully. It described life on the road with the band and the horrible boss, Harrison Chase. According to sources within the band and the road crew, Harrison could be cruel, described as a sharp-tongued jerk, and at times, if he didn't get his way or felt someone stepped out of line, physical violence wasn't off the table. Due to his quick temper, turnover on the tours was often high, leading to more stress for everyone as people were replaced, and training had to be implemented to bring their substitutes up to speed. "This says Harrison is prone to violence," I said, then took the last sip of my coffee and dropped the cardboard container into the trash. "Really?" Jordan leaned against the headboard, reading the paper. "Yes." "I don't see what that has to do with anything," he replied. "He's not in town." "That's what we've been told, but what if it's not true?" Jordan furrowed his brow and turned to me. "Do you think we were lied to?" "Maybe. Perhaps there was a big plan to kill Penelope, and he snuck back into town to put the plan into action." "Seems far-fetched, Sam." "I know, but I thought we were throwing ideas against the wall and seeing if anything sticks." "Fair enough." He returned to perusing the paper. "I can't imagine a woman being married to a man like that, and not having a mean streak as well," I mused. "A nice person wouldn't put up with that type of behavior." Kate already confirmed Helen wouldn't be described as a pleasant person. "I know. After reading about Harrison, though, I fully believe her." He folded the paper and set it to the side. "You doubted her?" "After what we witnessed last night at Sweet Scoops, yes, I did have some reservations. A few tears, telling company secrets. She was trying to cast guilt on everyone else. When I see someone acting like that, it makes me question their innocence." "So you think Kate killed Penelope to get to Milo?" His questions frustrated me, but I wasn't sure why. Perhaps because I didn't have any sure answers, and I desperately wanted to know who'd pushed those barrels and exactly who was the intended target, Penelope or me. I shut down my computer and put it in the safe. "Let's go interview Penelope's roommate." "Can we walk there, or is it too far?" "We have a lot of ground to cover today, and since we really don't know where we're going, it's probably best to take the car. We'll save time, and we have no idea what type of neighborhood we're venturing into. Considering that, I'd much rather be in a car." I sighed and nodded. A walk would help to clear my head. "Let's head out." I'll plug the address into my phone. We left our room and slid into the Lexus I'd purchased after recovering my money from the state of California. When my then-husband had been killed for embezzling millions from our friends and powerful Hollywood people without my knowledge, the state had frozen our assets to pay back the victims. It had taken years for me to untangle that legal mess and have my portion of the estate returned to me. Jordan drove as my phone navigated us to the address. We came upon Thomas Street, and Jordan slowed as the phone announced the destination was on the right. A small brown house stood surrounded by dead grass. Wilting rose bushes lined the driveway. I noted a few shingles missing from the roof and some paint chipping by the front door. The house seemed as if it were sick and tired of being upright, as did the red Kia in the driveway. "Are we sure this is where Penelope was living?" Jordan nodded. "That's what I was told. Let's go." We exited the car and walked up the cracked driveway. "This place has seen better days," he muttered. "Agreed." He rang the doorbell, but we didn't hear it chiming inside. "It must be broken," Jordan said. When no one came to the door, I reached out and knocked loudly. A moment later, a woman answered. Long black hair hung down the sides of her thin face. She wore black and red checkered pajama bottoms and an oversized black sweatshirt, as well as a fierce glare. "I don't have money to buy my lunch, so I'll save you the time. Whatever you're selling, I don't want it, okay?" "Hello," I said, smiling. "We aren't selling anything. You must be Greta." She narrowed her gaze. "Who wants to know?" I figured we'd found Greta based simply on her question. Ignoring her snootiness, I asked, "Is this where Penelope lived? Are you the people who are coming to get her stuff?" "No," Jordan said. "We just have a couple of questions." "About what?" "I need someone to clear out her stuff." She stepped to the side and pointed to a pile of boxes in the middle of the living room. "I have a new roommate moving in tomorrow. They said someone would be here to grab this mess." "You packed her stuff up pretty quick," I said, eyeing the boxes. "She only died yesterday." Greta shook her head. "I didn't do that. Penelope was moving out. She was the one who piled all this up in my living room." "She was moving out?" Jordan asked, peeking around the corner inside. "Yes." Greta sighed and crossed her arms over her chest. "I thought you were here to take it and get her out of my life once and for all. Based on the fact that she's dead, and you seem quite ready to forget her, I take it things didn't go well for you two as roommates," I ventured. Greta rolled her eyes and snorted. "You could say that again. Can you tell us about it?" "You aren't going to take her stuff?" "No, we aren't. We are interested in Penelope's life, though." I eyed the boxes and wondered if we were making a mistake in not taking them. There would be a great deal of personal things among the mundane possessions. Perhaps that would be the best way for us to get to know Penelope. But then I figured her family would want everything, the mundane and the important. Her poor parents. Greta leaned against the door jamb. "She moved in about a year ago. Said she'd just broken up with her boyfriend and was desperate for a place." "Why did they break up?" Greta shook her head and hesitated to answer. "You can tell us anything," Jordan said. "Your name won't be mentioned." She told me at first it was because he was controlling and abusive, and I felt sorry for her. It wasn't until later that I started to doubt it. "Why did you doubt her?" Greta sighed and bit her lip. "I overheard her on the phone with someone talking about Milo's parents having money stashed away somewhere." "Who was she talking to?" Jordan asked. "I don't know. I never asked her anything about it." "What was she saying about Milo's parents having money?" "I keep to myself," Greta said. "I mind my own business. I don't know anything but what I heard on that call, and I never asked her about any of it." "What did you hear?" I prodded. She sighed, obviously hesitant to tell us about the phone call. "We didn't get any information from you," Jordan said softly. "You'll never hear from us again." A bold promise considering Greta may be the killer, but I'd let the lie slide. Maybe things had become so horrible between her and Penelope, she decided to off her. It was a weak motive, but people had killed for less. Milo's parents are dead. They had a stash of cash somewhere, and Penelope was trying to find it, she blurted. Her story changed from Milo being controlling and abusive to her just being tired of dealing with him. She tried to get Milo to tell her where the money was, but he wouldn't. That's why she left him. The admission stunned me. I'd considered Penelope's death may have been about matters of the heart, that Milo had possibly killed her because she had broken up with him and he had trouble getting over her. Could it possibly be about matters of the wallet? And you never asked her about the conversation? I clarified. Nope. We didn't get along. Why was that? Jordan asked. Just a bad match of personalities, or something else? I was pretty sure she was stealing from me. Interesting. Penelope seemed to have a case of sticky fingers wherever she went. Could you prove it? Jordan asked. Not really. Stuff was going missing from my room shortly after she moved in. I confronted her, she denied it. I started locking my door, and the problem was resolved. Besides that, why didn't you two get along? I asked. I'm early to bed, early to rise. She was up all night, even though she worked mostly day shifts. When I left my job at the winery and took another position where I had to be up at 3 a.m, our relationship got even worse. She was up and around when you needed to be sleeping. Exactly. There were some days I just wanted to kill her. I arched my eyebrow at her choice of words. Anyway, Greta continued, the final straw was when she broke into my room. I'm not sure how she did it. Maybe she copied my key or went through the window, but she stole a bunch of money. I told her to get out. When was that? I asked. Months ago. She said she wouldn't leave. I had to hire an attorney to get her out. That awful woman has cost me so much money. Not to mention peace. I really, really hated her. Was the hate enough to kill? So, did I hear right that you used to work at the winery? Jordan asked. That detail had sailed right by me. Yes. And that's where you two met? That's right. After she moved into my house, rumors came up she was stealing there as well, but I left shortly after those started. How long did you work at the winery? I asked. About a year. I found a better job at the grocery store. The hours are horrible, but I make more. I stared at the woman, trying to figure out what way to take the conversation. Did I probe her connection to the winery, her hatred for Penelope, or that I'd changed my mind and I'd like to go through the boxes cluttering her living room? Do you know the worst part? She asked. I was supposed to give her back her deposit before she moved out. Can you believe that? All the misery she caused me, and I had to give her money. She shook her head. Ridiculous. Did that come from a judge? I asked. Yes. The only benefit is now that she's dead, I guess I don't owe her any money. I just wish someone would come get all her stuff. Thanks for your time, Greta, Jordan said, grabbing my elbow. We appreciate it. He hurried me down the driveway while Greta stared at us. As we pulled away, she went inside. Greta is an interesting suspect, Jordan said. I agree. She was familiar with the winery, and she hated Penelope. And she obviously needs the money, Jordan said. That house is looking pretty bad. She said she couldn't afford to buy herself lunch. Do you think she could have killed Penelope to get out of paying her the deposit? Perhaps, or maybe that was the final straw. It sounds like Penelope was a nightmare to live with. It does. We drove into downtown Old Cottonwood in silence. If Greta is the killer, that means those barrels weren't for me. That's true. It seems like we're just adding suspects and not eliminating them. Same with motives. There are people who I upset, although I'm not sure I made anyone mad enough to want to kill me. And Penelope also wasn't well liked by many. You're right about that, Jordan said, pulling up in front of Sweet Scoops. Let's go in and see Milo. I want to see his reaction to you, and learn more about his relationship with Penelope. Chapter 6. As we walked inside, I debated whether I wanted another ice cream cone. Usually, I was pretty careful with what I consumed, but I was on vacation. It was okay to live a little. On the other hand, my jeans were becoming a bit snug. Perhaps it would be best to skip it. But that peanut butter and chocolate had tasted absolutely divine the previous day. "Is Milo around?" Jordan asked. I glanced up to see a woman behind the counter. Tall and thin with short brown hair, I placed her in her 60s, but a very young 60. Her very thick biceps were noticeable through the sleeves of her shirt. Obviously, she worked out and lifted heavy things, something I had considered adding into my life, but I preferred traveling and eating ice cream instead. Narrowing my gaze, I realized I'd seen her before, but I wasn't sure where. She shook her head and ran a bandaged hand through her hair. "Milo isn't here today. Do you know where we can find him? He called in sick, so he better be at home. Can you tell us where he lives?" I asked. "No, I can't." She narrowed her gaze. "Who the heck are you anyway?" "We wanted to talk to Milo about his relationship with a girl who was killed yesterday," I replied. "Ah yes. Penelope Cray. Not a nice girl." "So you heard about her death," Jordan said. "I imagine in a small town, word travels fast." "You bet your bottom dollar it does. Why do you want to talk to Milo about it?" "We're just trying to gather information," I replied. "How long have you worked with him?" "I own this joint," she said, spreading her arms wide. "Milo's my employee and has been with me for years." It was then I realized Jordan had held the door open for her the prior day, when Milo had screamed at me about lying to him. "That's a long time," Jordan said. "What can I say?" She shrugged. "The boy has no ambition. He's fine scooping ice cream and at the end of the day, mopping the floors." "I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name," I said. "I love your store. The little smiling ice cream cones are really cute." I pointed to the border around the ceiling. "Thanks." She grinned and glanced around, obviously proud of what her family had created. "I'm Brenda Bonner, second-generation owner of this lovely shop. It's nice to meet you." "So you want to know about Milo, huh?" I nodded. "We're getting conflicting information about his relationship with Penelope. We just wanted to ask him a few questions." "I can tell you everything you want to know about those two." She shook her head and crossed her arms over her chest. "Milo's parents died a few years ago in a house explosion. They were cooking meth." "Oh my goodness," I said, suddenly feeling a deep pity for the young man. "How horrible." But wait. Greta had said his parents had money. Had they actually made a profit cooking meth? And where was this cash? Obviously not in a bank. Had they hidden it somewhere before they died? "It was," Brenda replied. "We all work with the hand we're dealt, right?" Jordan nodded, his mouth in a hard, fine line, a look I recognized as him thinking of his life prior to meeting me. His ex-wife and daughter had died in a gas leak. They'd gone to bed and never woken up. He was all too familiar with working with the hand that had been dealt. I became his surrogate mom, a role I wasn't too happy about, but I wasn't going to watch that boy flop and flail into adulthood and make a bunch of mistakes. She shook her head. "Now, I'm a little overprotective of him. I swear sometimes that kid has brain damage from the meth fumes he'd been subjected to his whole life. Either that, or he's just one of those people who makes bad choices like a pro. You know what I'm talking about?" Now it was my turn for my past to haunt me. Bad choices? Like embezzling money from the rich and powerful of Hollywood? Yes, my husband had been one of the people Brenda spoke of, and I'd married the sorry sack. Bad choices indeed. Anyway, the poor guy was head over heels in love with Penelope, she continued. Even talked about marrying her. I told him that was a bad idea, for a whole host of reasons. "What were those?" Jordan asked. "Well, for starters, He may be 26, but has the emotional intelligence of someone much younger. Like I said, those meth fumes will do that. Second, Penelope really rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know what her angle was, but why would a pretty smart girl like her date someone like Milo? It didn't make sense to me. Well, there had to be something she liked about him, I said. It's not his gift of conversation, Brenda replied. I can tell you that. Jordan cleared his throat. He seemed to anger quickly when we were in here yesterday. Is that a typical behavior for him? Oh yes, she said. Especially when he doesn't understand something, or he's trying to recall something that slipped his mind. She shrugged. Meth fumes? Like my identity. Then, when he'd discovered that he'd been right, and when I hadn't immediately admitted to it, he'd been furious. He used to work at the winery? Jordan asked. Yes. He was the night shift cleaning crew. That's where he met Penelope. How did he meet her if he was on the night shift? Their paths would cross when she was in charge of closing. She'd be leaving, and he'd be going in. Why doesn't he still work there? I asked. Was he fired? Brenda shook her head. It became too much for him. He worked days here, then cleaned up and went to the winery. When Penelope started to show interest in him and they began dating, he realized he wouldn't have any time with her if he kept both jobs. He wanted the same hours as her, so he gave his notice. Love wins every time, Jordan said. She chuckled and shook her head. Milo's great idea was to just stop showing up at the winery. I told him the right thing to do was to give notice. He shouldn't have listened to me and just gone with his plan. What happened? I asked. Helen and Harrison Chase are awful people. They fired him on the spot, had some unkind words for him, and kicked him out. It wasn't the first time we'd heard less than positive things about the Chases. They didn't even give him his last paycheck, she muttered. I sighed with disappointment. I'd been so excited to meet the dichotomy that was Harrison Chase, winery owner, death rock, lead singer of Vortex of Decay, hoping to find an interesting person full of personality. It seemed all I would discover was cruelty. That was the thing about celebrity. The persona given to the world was often not the guise of the true person. I hadn't been truthful with my fans. Online I'd posted pictures of me cooking lavish dinners, spatula in hand and apron on, that had actually been made by my housekeeper. Of course, I'd attended all the galas and important Hollywood functions and was photographed relentlessly there. I gave interviews about what makeup and hair products I used, then watched as the company stock rose. I did all the things my fans expected of me, of what they thought my lifestyle should be. But in truth, I wasn't the typical Hollywood persona. I had literally picked the dandelions growing in my backyard so I could make liver-cleansing teas. No one found that nearly as interesting as what shampoo I used or what brand of clothing I wore. When I met fans, I'd always feared I'd disappoint them because my private life was quite boring until I discovered my husband's crimes. We all had a facade that we showed the general public, celebrity or not. Now, out of the spotlight, I was much more comfortable in my own skin and my lot in life. I no longer worried about what people thought of me. In fact, Brenda continued, they screamed and yelled at him, getting him so rattled, he ended up running out of the winery with the company keys still in his pocket. He told me about it about a week later, but he was afraid to return them. I ended up dumping them in the winery's mailbox a few days later. He was terrified of Harrison. Was Milo ever violent? Jordan asked. About what? Anything? Can you recall a time when he was violent? A flicker of doubt crossed her face, but she shook her head. Not that I remember. Had I been mistaken that I thought she was hiding something? Perhaps an experience where she'd witnessed Milo being aggressive? I've got some work to do in back, Brenda said. Anything else you want to know? No thanks, Jordan said. Any chance we could get Milo's address? He gave her his best George Clooney grin, but I knew right away his charms wouldn't work on Brenda. Not a chance, she said. I've told you everything there is to know about his relationship with Penelope. He was head over heels in love. I don't know what her angle was, but she almost destroyed that boy's heart. He hasn't been the same since. You'd think after all this time he'd be over her, but he's not. And yesterday just about destroyed him. I respected how protective Brenda was of Milo. Everyone needed someone to look out for them. She'd stepped into the mama bear role, and her claws were out. No one was getting near him today. Milo will be just fine, she continued. Eventually, he'll be able to move on with his life, but today he needs to rest and take some time to heal. I nodded and grinned. It's really nice you look out for him like that. Thanks for your time, Brenda. We really appreciate it. Of course. Now if you two aren't going to buy something, scoot on out of here. I've got to get my taxes paid. We strode out into the fall sun, and I turned to Jordan. Where to now? While crossing his arms over his chest, he glanced up and down the street. I'm not sure. What are your thoughts? I'd like to see the murder scene again. I was so upset when it happened, I really didn't have a chance to take in anything. I'd like to poke around with a critical eye. Jordan nodded. I think we should hold off asking the sheriff about that. Right now, it will seem like we're being nosy. We should let him come to us. Okay, you can probably get in his head better than me since you used to work for the Haywood Sheriff's Department. I'm out of ideas on what to do next. Let's head back to the hotel and regroup. Maybe something will come to us. I glanced over at the bookstore I still hadn't visited, but it would have to wait. Murder had a way of wiggling into the brain, and taking up so much space, concentrating on anything else became impossible. Chapter 7. We strolled toward Quaint Corner in silence. I assumed Jordan was thinking the same thing as me. Were those barrels meant for me or for Penelope? Once we figured that part out, it would become easier to decipher who the killer may be. If they were intended for me, then I had to assume it was Milo or Helen. I'd made them both furious the previous day. However, it seemed Penelope had also angered many people. And apparently, she liked to steal from everyone as well. Her thieving seemed like a much greater motive than me spilling wine and not admitting my true identity to someone. Glancing up, I noticed Kate on the other side of the street, hurrying toward the winery, staring at her phone. She stopped to read something on the screen, then continued her trek while stuffing the phone in her purse. Except she missed, and it fell to the pavement. Kate! I yelled, trotting across the street. She didn't hear me. I reached her phone and picked it up. The screen came alive. A text from Milo. I'm glad she's gone. It's actually a relief for me. I wish it would have happened sooner. My blood ran cold as the screen faded to black. Had I read that right? Milo was glad Penelope was dead? And he wished it had happened sooner? Maybe he could have made it happen, even? What are you doing? Jordan asked. I turned the phone upright again and put it in front of Jordan's face. After reading it, he arched an eyebrow. Well, it seems Milo is pretty pleased his ex-girlfriend has died. I nodded and looked up ahead at Kate. He's comfortable admitting it to her, which is bothersome. We should return her phone. I ground my jaw as I considered turning it in to the sheriff. Instead of telling him I had my suspicions that Kate or Milo may be the killer, I could say we'd found it on the sidewalk. It wasn't a complete lie. I just have to hope he picked up the phone and noticed the text from Milo. What are you thinking, Sam? Jordan asked. Frankly, I didn't have a lot of faith in the sheriff. He'd probably shove the device in a drawer, and it would never be seen again. I glanced at the screen one more time, noting it had 5% battery life left. If the sheriff ever got around to looking at it, the battery would be dead. I sighed. Let's go after her. Kate, he yelled much louder than I had. She turned and I held up her phone. Her shoulders slumped and she hurried toward us. Thanks so much, she said. I didn't even realize I dropped it. You shoved it into your purse, but you missed the pocket, I said. We watched the whole thing. Thanks again. She glanced over her shoulder at the way she'd come. I've got to go. I'm late to a meeting. Where are you off to? Jordan asked, handing her the device. I noted her pretty purple nails with gold designs, and one of them was missing. The winery, she replied. Helen wants everyone there. I thought it would be closed since a murder took place there yesterday, I said, attempting to keep my calm composure, but my discovery had me rattled. Had Kate really killed Penelope to start a romance with Milo? She shrugged. I don't know. We received a group text this morning, telling us to be there at 11. I can't imagine Helen would do something illegal. She furrowed her brow and shook her head. Well, I take that back. Yes, I can imagine it. I've got to go. Thanks for catching my phone fail. As she turned and jogged toward the winery, Jordan said, we should have questioned her about that last part. She already said that Helen wasn't a nice person. That's true. He sighed and crossed his arms over his chest. That seems to be the consensus around here. We continued our short walk toward the hotel. I had no idea who to speak to or where to go to solve the murder. As we got closer to the quaint corner, I glanced up the street toward the winery. I'd love to be a fly on the wall, to hear what Helen had to say. A man parked a nondescript white van in the winery lot. I gasped when he exited and glanced toward us. Tall and thin with a long black beard, he wore dark sunglasses and a red baseball cap, jeans and a white t-shirt. Tattoos covered his arms. I'd never have given him a second thought if I hadn't done research on Harrison Chase, aka Death Rock. In case I had the opportunity to meet him, I'd memorized his face. That's Harrison, I said, pointing at him as he ran up the winery stairs. He's supposed to be out of town for a month. That's definitely what we were told. What's he doing here? Were we lied to? Jordan shrugged. I don't have the answers you're looking for, Sam. I think we were lied to. Maybe, but there is also a world where he was on tour and then someone was killed in his winery, and he came home because of it. Perhaps you're right. I stared at the building on the hill for a long moment. There's also a world where we were told he was on tour, and he was hiding in that basement, waiting to kill the woman who was stealing from him. They'd be able to tell whether he was on tour or not through receipts and show tickets sold, not to mention people posting about seeing Vortex of Decay all over social media. You're right. Let's go back to the room and find out. A quick search on the computer should tell us. Let me stop in this store first and get some snacks, Jordan said. I have a feeling this won't be a quick search, and I'm hungry. Don't you have faith in my internet skills? I asked, following him into the store. Absolutely. I just know you'll keep digging, and there won't be anything quick about it. He wasn't wrong. Once I got sucked down a proverbial rabbit hole, I often lost track of time. After Jordan grabbed his snacks, we continued our walk to the hotel while I stared up at the winery. Let's walk around the other side of that hill, I said. We haven't been over there. Why? I shrugged. I want to see what's on the other side. Maybe there's another entrance we aren't aware of. If there is, it would possibly answer a lot of questions about whether anyone could have been inside the winery without being seen. All right, Sherlock, good point. Let's do it. We passed the hotel and the winery. We strolled around the hill and glanced up. How about that, Jordan said. A door was visible, and the path led down the side of the hill through the grapevines to the street. If a person had a key, they could slip in there. I wonder where the entrance leads into the building. The basement? Another area? Jordan shook his head. I don't know. It's hard to tell from this angle, and I wasn't paying much attention to the layout. I wasn't either. No one thinks they're going to get caught in the middle of a murder investigation while trying to enjoy their vacation. We stared at the door for a long moment. What do you think about us following the path? Jordan asked. And maybe peeking inside if the door is open, to see where in the building it leads? It's a terrible idea. We'd be trespassing. Penelope is dead, I said. I feel a deep obligation to find out who killed her and why. Especially if those barrels were meant to take me out instead of her. I glanced up at the building again. And I don't see any cameras, so we may not even be noticed. Jordan sighed and nodded. We can afford bail money. Let's go. We followed the dirt trail upward. One set of footprints stuck out at me because the brand had been molded into the sole. It read Cherry Kicks. Look at this, I said, pointing to the dirt. This may be a clue to whoever murdered Penelope. Jordan fished out his phone and took a picture. I've never heard of Cherry Kicks. We'll have to do some research on what type of shoes those are. Based on the design and treading, I'd say sneakers. Agreed. He studied the dirt. There's a lot of shoe prints around, so I'm guessing this door gets used quite frequently. The Cherry Kicks really stand out though. We've got a photo, so let's keep going. We can talk about it later. As we walked in silence, I kept my gaze trained on the ground. Lots of different prints, but nothing that stood out like the Cherry Kicks. We reached the door. My heart thudded with fear and nerves. I wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans and placed my cheek against the panel, hoping to hear something from inside that would indicate what part of the winery I would find if I opened the door. Hear anything? Jordan whispered. Not really. There are voices, but I can't understand what they're saying. I shut my eyes and concentrated for a moment, then shook my head. A woman is talking. Jordan leaned his head against the door. I can't understand her either. Do you think it's because we're getting old, or is she just speaking quietly? Let's go with her talking softly. We both smiled, then gave up our surveillance. Should we try to open the door? I asked. Let me do it. He placed his hand on the handle and gently pushed it down. He raised his eyebrows at the click. We're in. After he pulled it open, we both looked inside to find an area I hadn't seen while inside the winery. What is this place? Jordan said, stepping inside. Hold the door, I whispered. I hurried inside and realized I was in the basement. As I rounded the corner, the stairs were to my left and were blocked with yellow police tape. When I'd been standing in this area the day Penelope had been killed, I'd felt like someone was watching me from the darkness. Perhaps I'd been correct. Someone had waited on top of the barrels and pushed them. During the chaos, they descended the other side and hid behind the stairs until they could sneak out the door. The voices upstairs were much clearer now I was inside, and I realized Helen was speaking. Sorry for Penelope's death, but we all need to get back to work as soon as the sheriff clears the downstairs, she said. I don't want to go down there, a man muttered. There were a couple voices of agreement. We'll get to that later, Helen huffed, exasperation in her voice. Harrison wants to talk to you all. That's why he's here today. I thought you were on tour, a woman asked. Maybe Kate. He ignored her. Listen up, he growled. Penelope was stealing from us, and I'm not happy about it. If I catch any of you doing the same, you won't be pleased with the fate I deal you. Do we understand each other? I gasped, and was afraid I'd be heard in the heavy silence that had descended upon the building. So much for trying to calm his employees and assure them that they were safe. Had he just admitted to killing Penelope? Or was he just talking tough to his employees to prevent any more theft? Do you understand me? He screamed. What a horrible human. A few weak affirmations answered him. I hurried back to Jordan. Did you hear that? He nodded. Let's go, Sam. If that was him admitting he'd killed Penelope, we don't want to be caught entering his building illegally. He could do the same to us. Chapter 8. Jordan and I ran down the hill, while my knees protested loudly with shooting pains radiating with every step. As we walked around to the front of the winery, I noted a sheriff's cruiser parked at our hotel. I glanced over my shoulder as we crossed the street. The meeting must have ended, as I saw people hurrying down the stairs. Harrison and Helen stood at the top, both with their arms crossed over their chests, the king and queen gazing down on their fleeing peasants. I shook my head. What miserable people! I wouldn't be one bit surprised if one of them was the killer, or they'd work together to off poor Penelope. They most certainly had the disposition. However, I wasn't sure how to prove it. After entering the gorgeous hallway leading to our room, I realized a group of people had gathered at the end of the hall. What the heck? Jordan muttered. What are they doing? They were gathered at our room. 2 deputies stood at our door. With a gasp, I brushed past Jordan. What's going on here? Who are you? One of the deputies asked, placing his arm out in front of me so I couldn't enter. In his 30s, his wide chest indicated he spent a lot of time in the gym. This is our room. I looked past him and almost sank to my knees at the destruction I saw. Oh my word. Jordan placed his hand on my shoulder. Did you guys toss this place? Of course not, the deputy said, furrowing his thick brows. We thought. Sheriff Michaels came into view inside the room and waved to us. Let them in. Come on. I shot the deputy a glare, and he lowered his arm. Sheriff, what happened here? I asked. I was hoping you could tell me, he said, then pointed at the bare mattress. Sit. The room hadn't been tossed. It had been destroyed. Someone had taken a knife not only to the mattress, but to the sofa and chairs. The beautiful art I'd admired had been torn from the walls, our clothes strewn all over the place. Even the television hadn't been spared, its shattered screen staring back at us, partially hanging from its mount. I picked up a pair of my underwear. They'd been ripped to shreds. Jordan whispered a curse as he sat down next to me. What the heck is going on here, Sheriff? Why are you in our room? The hotel called us, he replied, picking up a chair from the floor and writing it. He sat down and pulled out a pen and notebook. Housekeeping came in to clean up and saw a tornado had come through. Who would do something like this? I asked. That's what I was hoping you could tell me, Ms. Jones. Was anything taken? Jordan asked. The sheriff shook his head. Not that I can tell, but take a look around and let me know if you notice anything. We put all valuables in the safe, I said. Is it still here? Yes. Doesn't look like it's been touched. So no robbery, Jordan muttered. Just trashed the room. They also left you message, Sheriff Michaels said. It's in the bathroom. If you don't touch anything, I can show it to you. Jordan and I stood and followed him into the bathroom. Across the mirror someone had written, "Leave town now," in my lipstick. They'd also ground it down to a stub on the counter. My mascara wand had been snapped in half, and my blush compact crushed into thousands of pieces. Do you want to tell me what you two have been up to? Michaels asked. Besides getting yourself caught in the middle of a murder investigation? Staring at the message, my anger burned my cheeks. Someone didn't want us asking questions, but their threat wasn't working. I felt no fear, as I assumed they'd hoped I would. I wasn't going anywhere. Not much, Jordan said. Just asking a few questions. Why? Because we were afraid that those barrels that killed Penelope were meant for Sam, Jordan said. If that was the case, I was worried that the murderer would be coming after Sam again, and we wanted to find them before they found us first. Interesting, Michaels said. Why don't we leave the room, so my deputies can process the scene for fingerprints? The hotel has been kind enough to provide us with a meeting space for us to have a little chat. We followed the sheriff to the hallway, outside and into the lobby. He tipped his hat at the female clerk who stared at us wide-eyed. I smiled as I ground my jaw, my fury rising with every step. Who had ruined our belongings in such a horrible, violent way? The sheriff led us into a meeting room and flipped on the lights. Stacks of chairs sat in a corner while tables were folded up along the walls. One lone table had been erected with 3 chairs. "Grab a chair," he ordered, and shut the door. Once we were all seated, he asked, "Now why do you think those barrels were meant for you, Ms. Jones?" "She upset 2 people," Jordan replied. "One was Milo. We told you about him. The second was Helen Chase. Sam broke a very rare and expensive bottle of wine, and Helen wasn't exactly gracious about it." The sheriff scratched this out in his notebook. "So you think that those 2 incidents might have caused one of them to murder you?" "Not necessarily," Jordan said. "It was just a thought, one that we wanted to explore in case it was true. We don't want to be hunted. We'd rather be on the offense." Sheriff Michaels stared at us a long moment before saying, "You want to know what I think?" I really didn't. My hands shook with fury. If I didn't take action, it felt as if I may internally combust. The person who had trashed our room had to be the killer. "Of course," Jordan replied. "Let's hear it." "I think you and Ms. Jones are a little too self-important," he said. "You roll into town, have a couple of less than desirable interactions, and now you think someone is trying to kill you?" He shook his head. "Seems downright ridiculous to me." Little stars of light shone before my eyes, going off like fireworks. "How dare you?" I hissed. "And here's another thing," Michaels said, pointing at me. "If you think that one of our townsfolk is sick enough to try to murder you over a little altercation, I'm beginning to wonder if you destroyed your own hotel room just to keep the spotlight on yourselves." I shot to my feet and began to pace, stuffing my hands into my jeans so I didn't lash out at the man. "Let me explain something to you, Sheriff," Jordan said, his voice calm, but anger simmered beneath the surface. I admired his control. "In any murder investigation, you have to look at every possibility. The fact that Sam was in that basement at the time those barrels came down had to be considered. Milo seemed unstable to us. Helen was furious and didn't try to hide it. People have been killed for much less. And no, we didn't trash our own room. You saying that is showing a level of stupidity that surprises me. Hey, don't you ever. If you want to know what we've discovered while poking around, we'll be happy to help and share it with you," Jordan continued. "But you must realize we're working on the same case: who killed Penelope and why. And that investigation also needs to include the possibility that she wasn't the intended target." "Idiot," I muttered under my breath when my back was turned to Michaels. "Okay, I'll play," he replied. "Tell me what you've got. What big clue have you uncovered that will solve this case?" "It's not one big clue, but a bunch of different puzzle pieces," I said, returning to my chair. "We have to figure out how they all fit together." He nodded. "Let's hear it." "Gosh. Where did we begin?" "We talked to Brenda Bonner," I said. "She's the owner of Sweet Scoops. She did claim that Milo isn't right in the head. She thinks it was from the meth fumes he grew up inhaling. His parents were blown up while cooking," Jordan added. "Both of those facts could definitely contribute to mental illness and anger issues." "Go on," Michaels urged. "He had a huge crush on Penelope," I said. "One he couldn't seem to get over, according to Milo himself. And he once worked at the winery with her. He knew the layout and could have easily moved around undetected." "So you're blaming the death on the scorned boyfriend?" Michaels asked. "No," Jordan replied. "We're saying he needs to be investigated closer. Everyone told us Harrison Chase was out of town on tour," I said. "But he's not. I saw him this morning, and I can tell you he's got an anger issue. I don't know if he just landed back in Cottonwood today, or if he's been here the whole time. We were going to check his tour schedule and search social media for posts about him and the band. However, I heard him yelling from the street, and his tone was scary. Okay, a little lie there, but I'd bet anyone $100 that if we'd been on the front side of the winery, we would have heard every word he'd said." "Penelope was stealing from the Chases," Jordan said, glazing over my fib without a second glance. "We've had multiple people confirm that girl had sticky fingers, including her roommate." Her roommate also had some interesting things to say, I continued. Milo's parents apparently stashed some money somewhere before they died, and Penelope was trying to find it. Meth heads amassing a small fortune? What is this? A real-life season of Breaking Bad? Michaels asked. I don't believe that for a second. I worked the case when they blew themselves up. No money to be found, trust me. I didn't know who to believe. Greta, who could have possibly killed Penelope for financial reasons, or the sheriff. Apparently, my opinion of him stood at an all-time low. We heard Harrison tell his employees that if they stole from him, he'd deal them a fate they wouldn't be happy with, I added. And one of their employees shared that Helen and Harrison were on the phone together recently, talking about Penelope's stealing. They were both quite angry, Jordan continued. If she became that furious with me for spilling an expensive bottle of wine, then how angry would she be about someone stealing from her? I asked. Dang, Jordan and I were on a roll, and the more we talked about it, the more certain I became I wasn't the target. I may have been collateral damage if Jordan hadn't called me away from Penelope at that second, but I wasn't the mark. Then there's a fellow employee of Penelope's, Jordan said. From our observations, it looks like she's got a crush on Milo. What better way to get Milo's full attention than to get rid of Penelope? How did I bring up that I'd read a text from Milo on Kate's phone about him being happy Penelope was gone? The sheriff was already doubting our intentions in being tangled up in this case. Even though the interaction between Kate and I had been innocent, I didn't want to give him any more fuel. What's her name? The sheriff asked, writing furiously. Kate, Jordan and I said in unison. You may want to check and see if she's had any contact with Milo recently, I said, hoping I'd at least planted a small seed without letting him know I'd seen her phone. Anything else you want to share? Michaels asked. I shook my head. Nothing I can think of. Even mentioning all the suspects out loud and giving the reasons why they were on our radar didn't hone anything for me. The case was still clear as mud. Alrighty then, Michael said, standing. I know I said this once, but I'm going to tell you again, don't leave town. With a smile, I nodded. Even if he had begged us to hightail it out of Cottonwood, we wouldn't. We'd stay right where we were until Penelope's killer was found. Chapter 9. The hotel set us up in a new room, similar to the one that had been destroyed. After a few hours, we were allowed to return to the crime scene to gather our belongings, or what was left of them. I beelined it for the safe and retrieved my computer. Why don't you head back to the other room and do that research? Jordan said, pulling out our suitcases from the closet. I'll pick through this mess and see what's salvageable and clean up the rest. That's perfect, I said. Are the suitcases ruined or were those spared? He held one up and turned it around. It looks okay. Furrowing my brow, I asked, I wonder why they spared the suitcases. Jordan shrugged. Who knows? I think they just wanted to enact as much damage as possible in a short period of time. It made sense. Whoever was responsible wouldn't want to be caught destroying our room. Wait a minute. Did the sheriff mention security cameras? I'm assuming the hotel has some. I would think so, Jordan said. Stop by the front desk and ask them about it. I will. See you in a bit. How in the world had we not considered cameras beforehand? Probably because we came from a time where no one had a camera perched on their home or business. Life was much simpler then. As I hurried to the lobby, I searched the ceiling for the surveillance. I didn't find any until I walked outside. One sat above the door, but none inside the hallway leading to our room. Every 10 feet or so, I noted another camera. There were 2 visible inside the lobby. Hi, I greeted the clerk, a lovely young woman with long brown hair and the greenest eyes I'd ever seen. Perhaps she wore contacts. I was wondering why there weren't any cameras in the hallway leading to the customer rooms in that section of the hotel. I pointed behind me. It's for customer privacy, she replied. Hotel policy. I nodded, greatly disappointed. Did the sheriff collect any of the footage from the cameras that you do have? Yes, he did. He left with it a while ago. Leaning toward her, I grinned and said, any chance I could get a look? Unfazed by my attempt to sweet-talk her, she replied, you'd have to speak to the manager and she's gone for the day. I debated raising my voice and becoming a big pain in her butt, maybe throw in a little nastiness, but flies, honey and all that. Okay, thank you, I said, grinning. I'd love to see it if you change your mind. She shrugged and shook her head. I won't. That's hotel policy, and I need to follow it. With a heavy sigh, I headed down another hall, also without cameras, to our new room and unlocked the door. While my computer warmed up, I put on a pot of coffee. Yes, I despised using hotel room coffee makers, but after the emotional roller coaster of the past couple of days, I was exhausted. Desperate times called for desperate measures. Once I had my coffee in hand, I took a seat and concentrated on my computer. I went to Instagram and searched for Vortex of Death. A page of concert photos came up from the band's own account. Some photos showed the band backstage, others of them performing. They obviously had someone on tour who was responsible for taking interesting pictures and keeping the social media alive. I studied each photo carefully, looking for any indication of Harrison's demeanor. The backstage photos all showed Harrison smiling, his arm around fans' shoulders. On-stage photos consisted of him screaming into a microphone or pointing at the audience. The last photo was snapped the day before Penelope was murdered, had been taken from the stage wings. Harrison stood with his hands in the air and his head tilted back as the audience screamed and cheered for him. His leather-clad legs were widely braced, almost as if the energy from his admirers would blow him over. I realized I was seeing Harrison's performing persona, the one he showed his fans. When I'd soared to the heights of fame, I also had a mask I wore for fans. No matter what type of day I was having, I smiled and had a kind word to say to everyone. I never wanted to disappoint anybody, and it seemed Harrison had a similar demeanor. That wasn't the same person I'd heard screaming at his employees at the winery. I checked other social media accounts and found the band on TikTok. Videos of their performance, some short clips from backstage, a few of the band after the show kicking back and unwinding with a cocktail or two. A couple tours of the private jet. In all the videos, Harrison seemed like a nice guy. The last post on TikTok had been the day before Penelope was killed as well. I sat back in my chair, pushed my glasses up my nose and then crossed my arms over my chest. None of what I found proved anything, but the fact there weren't any posts from the day Penelope died gave me pause. Harrison could have come home the night of the last performance and killed her the next day. Where had he been? The last post had been tagged with hashtag Kansas City, hashtag We Love Kansas. Kansas was just east of Colorado. That would be a very easy plane ride home, I muttered. I clicked over to the band's website. The tour had ended that night and would resume in another month. Even though everyone said he hadn't been in town, he very well could have been. No, I hadn't found a burning clue that would solve this case, but it did move the needle in the direction of Harrison being the murderer. I switched gears. The next thing I wanted to research was the brand of shoe we'd found in the dirt on the way up to the winery, Cherry Kicks. The search results surprised me, and I whispered a curse under my breath. I had plenty of money, but I'd never spend over $1,000 on a pair of sneakers. Whoever was wearing those has cash to burn, I muttered. Considering all the suspects, the only person I could assume had anything close to that amount of money were Helen and Harrison Chase. If he could afford to fly the band around in a private jet, he could afford a pair of Cherry Kicks. I clicked through the site and studied the treads of the different shoes. All were stamped with the brand name. With a sigh, I texted Jordan and asked him to send me the pictures he'd taken on the path up to the winery. A minute later, they arrived. The conversation bubble on my phone was active, so I waited to see what else he had to say. Look at this picture. From when you spilled the wine. After setting my glasses aside, I squinted at the phone and used my fingers to enlarge the picture. That day, Helen had stepped into the wine and tracked footprints across the floor. They matched the ones in the dirt up to the winery, Cherry Kicks. At least I was right about who could afford $1,000 shoes, but it really didn't mean much. Helen was owner of the winery, so I expected her footprints to be on the path leading to the back door. Even if her footprints were on top of the barrels in her basement, it didn't mean she'd killed anyone. I sighed and rubbed my eyes, then fetched another cup of the awful and probably contaminated with who knows what coffee. "What are you going to do now, Sam?" I muttered into the silence as I stared at my computer screen, willing it to give me some bright ideas on finding the killer. I startled and shot to my feet when the door opened. Jordan came in carrying the 2 suitcases. Taking a deep breath, I tried to calm my nerves. The coffee wasn't helping. "Were you able to find anything to keep?" I asked. He set them on the bed and shook his head. "I've got 1 pair of jeans that escaped destruction. You have a sweater and a couple pair of underwear. We need to go shopping." I groaned and nodded. "We should probably do that sooner rather than later." "Probably." He sat down on the bed, then stretched across it with a low groan. "Did you find anything interesting?" Harrison doesn't have any social media or tour dates beyond the day before Penelope was killed. So we can't verify he was away. And we can't verify he was in town, but he very well could have been. It's something to keep in mind. I sank back into my chair and sipped my drink. "What about Milo's social media?" Jordan asked, sitting upright. "Or Kate's? Have you looked at Penelope's?" I shook my head. I was focused on Harrison. "Do we have a last name for Milo?" "I didn't think about that," Jordan said. "I can't recall we've heard one." "Me neither." I set down my cup and turned to the computer. "But I do remember Penelope's last name is Cray. I'll see what I can dig up on Instagram and TikTok." It took a few minutes for me to discover the correct Penelope Cray. As most young women are, she had been very active on both social media platforms. The first dozen or so pictures were of her and me at the winery. She'd tagged Milo in them, as well as some other people we hadn't met. So excited to meet Samantha Rathbone, my #hero. And give her a tour of the inner workings of the winery. I hadn't realized she'd taken so many photos. "That's rude," I muttered. Why would she tag her ex-boyfriend in a picture with the woman whose character had given her the strength to leave him? "She really did that?" Jordan asked. I nodded. "That's really mean." He shook his head. "Penelope wasn't as sweet as she seemed." I scrolled back far enough to find pictures of her and Milo. He stared at her with large puppy dog eyes, while she glammed it up at the camera with fake eyelashes and fish lips. The last picture of them together came with a caption. "Sometimes goodbye is the hardest word to say. However, this baby bird must spread her wings. Thanks for the memories." I understood it was probably supposed to be a profound post on Penelope outgrowing Milo, but all I could do was snort and chuckle. Age tended to make one more cynical. After discovering a few more with her and her roommate, I pinpointed the date as when she'd first moved in. They looked happy, so it must have been before Penelope started stealing. I also found some selfies of her hiking by herself and at the winery. I was able to track down Kate's and Milo's accounts through the likes. Neither of their accounts offered anything of significance. Milo hadn't posted anything since around the time Penelope had left him. Kate had a few vague posts about a boy she was interested in. Milo had liked the posts, which also gave me the giggles, since I figured they'd been about him. Men were sometimes so blind. With a sigh, I shut the computer. Nothing stood out to me. Nothing pointed to one person as the murderer. "Anything?" Jordan asked from the bed, his eyes closed. "No." A loud knock sounded at our door. Jordan shot to his feet, and hurried to answer it while I took my coffee cup to the bathroom and dumped it. "Sheriff," Jordan said. "What can we do for you? Are you checking to make sure we've settled in okay?" "Ha. Funny one. I want you to come to the winery with me." Furrowing my brow, I hustled back to the door. "What for?" "I want you to walk me through what you think happened," he said. "Take me down in the basement and show me the killer's moves. Everything from how they got in to how they got away." Chapter 10. Well, I certainly hadn't expected the sheriff to ask us for assistance, but as we walked over to the winery, my stomach fluttered with excited butterflies. I'd finally be able to look around with a critical eye, free of the surprise and horror of the murder that I'd felt when previously there. I did wonder why it had taken him a full day to come to us. Yes, he'd interviewed Jordan and me after the killing, but it had been more of an interrogation. This was different. He was asking for assistance, and to get a very clear picture of everything we'd seen that fateful day. What had changed his mind? The break-in at the hotel? Something Harrison and Helen had said to him? "The Chases have agreed to allow you in," the sheriff said. "As a favor to me." "That's nice of them," I replied. Apparently, I was also going to get the opportunity to question Harrison. The horrible day had sure taken a turn for the better. "No one's working the tram, so we're going to have to take the stairs," Michaels muttered. "I hate these things. Why couldn't they just build the winery at street level?" At least I agreed with the sheriff on something. "I thought it was because they needed space to grow the grapes," I said. "If the building were street level, there wouldn't be room." By putting the winery on top of the hill, they were able to plant the vines down the hill. The sheriff shot me a glare, then whispered something under his breath, but I didn't question him. The three of us trudged up the stairs. When we reached the top, we all took a moment to catch our breath. I vowed to start jogging again and lay off the wine and ice cream. "Let's go inside," Michael said. Jordan and I followed him through the large doors. Helen and Harrison sat at a booth in the empty restaurant, eyeing us with disdain as we approached. At one time, the winery had seemed so inviting. Now it held a thick cloud of negativity. "Helen, it's nice to see you again," I said, smiling. Then I turned to her husband. "And you must be Harrison." He nodded but didn't reach out to shake my hand. Another clue to his real personality. He couldn't even bring out the mask he wore for his fans for me. "I've been following your career," I continued. "You've got your fingers in a lot of pies. Vortex of Death and many wineries. It's an odd combination, don't you think?" "You follow Vortex of Death?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "Not really," I said. "It's a recent interest. Murder makes me curious about everyone involved." "What does that mean?" he asked. "Are you saying I killed Penelope?" I smiled and glanced Helen's way. "How are you today?" She smirked and rolled her eyes. "I'd offer you something to drink, but I'm sure you'd spill it." Wow. I'd really ruffled her feathers. I wanted to tell her I didn't want any of her horrible wine, but I'd actually really enjoyed what I'd tried. I decided to ignore her instead. I glanced down at her sneakers and smiled, verifying once again she was the guilty party wearing the cherry kick shoes. It was one clue, but there were many others that didn't fit in with Helen being the killer. Since the two were so rude to me, I decided to give it right back to them. I squared my shoulders and puffed out my chest a bit, a stance my character Cassie always took on the soap opera as the years turned. I also lowered my voice and clipped my words. Cassie was in the house. "So Harrison, I was wondering if it was pure coincidence that you came home the night before or the day of Penelope's murder." His face blanched as he furrowed his brow. "What? Why don't we go downstairs?" Michael said, grabbing my arm and pulling me away from the Chases. "We'll be out of your hair shortly, Harrison." As he led me across the empty restaurant, he muttered, "You better watch your step there, Missy. That man has donated more to the sheriff's department than any other citizen." If you're going to accuse him of murder, you have to have a solid case. I yanked my arm away from him and narrowed my gaze. He's a horrible person. If he did kill Penelope, I wouldn't be surprised. I can't arrest him on gut feelings. I need proof. We stood by the door leading to the basement. If he's such a big donor, are you sure you want to arrest him? Jordan asked. Because it feels a little like you'd rather cut your arm off with a dull saw instead of finding out Harrison killed Penelope. He sighed, placing his hands on his hips. You're right. I'm praying it's not Harrison or Helen. They've agreed to donate 2 pickup trucks to the department, and I really need them. Jordan crossed his arms over his chest and glared at the sheriff. But if they're involved, I'll do my job, the sheriff said quickly. I would hope so, I replied. Now tell me what you saw that day, Michael said. Tell me everything about the tour and what you observed that day. First, Penelope showed us the wine racks by the front door, I said. She told us about the wines. While she was talking, I noticed Helen going through this door before we went downstairs with Penelope. Turning, I kept my eye on Helen and hoped my voice was low enough she couldn't hear me. I never saw her come back up. Then we went downstairs, Jordan continued as he opened the door, motioning me and the sheriff forward. I followed Michael's down while Jordan brought up the rear. Once we reached the bottom, I walked over to the barrels that had collapsed. Before these came down, I noticed a purple nail with gold decoration right there. I don't know if that's a clue or not, but I do know it belongs to the employee named Kate who works here. How do you know that? Michaels asked, scribbling furiously in his notebook. When we left the winery the evening of the murder, she was working the tram. She had gloves on then, but when we saw her on the street earlier today, I noted her nails. The design was a perfect match, and one of them was missing. Perhaps she snapped it off when she loosened the clasp, Jordan said, shrugging. Or maybe it was coincidence it was here. I'll look into it, Michaels replied. What happened after you noticed the fingernail? Jordan called me over to the corner there. I pointed to the farthest part of the room. Why? Someone had carved something into the wooden beam, and I called Sam over to look at it. What did it say? M and K. The part that caught my eye was the heart around it, lots of flourish in the carving, as if an artist had drawn it. Milo and Kate, I muttered. Perhaps, said Michaels. Another question I'll have to ask. Then the barrels came down, I said, shaking my head. It scared us to death. Silence fell around us, as we stared at the spot where Penelope had died. After a moment, Michaels cleared his throat. So your assumption is that someone was waiting on top of the barrels for Penelope? I nodded. I don't think I was the target. What made you change your mind? Michaels asked. There's just too many people who had trouble with Penelope, I replied, shrugging. Have you been up there? Jordan asked, pointing to the top of the remaining stacked casks. Yes. Would you like to see what we found? Jordan and I exchanged glances. Absolutely, he replied. Let's take a look. Michaels pulled out his phone and began scrolling. After a moment, he turned it toward us. There were quite a few footprints left in the dust on top. I pulled off my glasses and squinted. I noted 3 different treads, but one stuck out to me. The cherry kicks belonged to Helen, I whispered. She's wearing them right now. The sheriff's eyes widened. You sure about that? Yes. They are also on the path leading out of here. Show me, Michaels demanded. Jordan retrieved his phone from his back pocket and presented the sheriff with the pictures we'd taken of the dirt path leading up to the back of the winery. Well, I'll be darned, Michaels said. Would you look at that? Here's our theory, I said, now excited. I pointed to the remaining stacked barrels. Someone hid up there. Once the barrels fell, they hurried down this backside, then ran behind the stairs. We walked over to where we'd stood after the murder. Jordan turned on the flashlight to reveal the space. All they'd have to do is hide in this area and when the coast was clear, slip out the back, Jordan said. We followed the path a short distance until we'd reached the back door. I pushed it open, and the sheriff sighed. After stepping into the sunlight, Michaels glanced around for a long moment. "I think you're probably right," he muttered. I was going on the assumption the killer ran up the stairs after pushing down the barrels, but no one saw anyone coming out of that door up there. This makes much more sense. I didn't think to look at the back of the winery. Pursing my lips together, I hoped it hid my smile. Unfortunately, small-town sheriffs were notoriously slow during murder investigations. "Let's go back inside," he said. We returned to the basement, and he pulled up the picture from on top of the barrels again. "You wouldn't happen to recognize any of these other footprints, would you?" I shook my head. I really don't go around studying shoes. We noticed the cherry kicks on the pathway, and I did some research on them. They're very expensive, and I figured the only people within a mile of this murder that could afford them would be the Chases. I verified she's wearing them right now when we came in. "You told Harrison that he got home the night before the murder," Michaels continued. "Or the day of," I said. I did a little search on social media about it. The last post was the day before the murder. We were also told he was on tour, and then, suddenly, he wasn't any longer. Not sure if that's a clue or a coincidence, but you can probably verify that through travel itineraries. "Even if he flew home on a private jet, there'd be a record of it," Jordan said. "But if Harrison killed her and he wanted to make it seem he was not here when it happened, why wouldn't he just slip back out of town?" the sheriff asked. I shrugged. "I don't know. You'd have to ask him about that." "You're sure that nail belongs to Kate?" he asked. "Yes, we saw her yesterday with the exact same design, and she was missing one. But we're also sure that Milo was head over heels in love with Penelope," Jordan said. "When she broke up with him, he was devastated. It just about ruined him, according to Brenda Bonner. Whoever did this may have come in through the back door, so they'd need a key," Michaels said. "Everyone involved had a key except Milo," I replied. "So that disqualified him." "Okay, I've got a lot to think about." Michaels glanced up the stairs. "I really wanted those pickup trucks for the department, but dang, it seems like those two are involved. With Penelope stealing from them, they've got a motive. Since this is their place, they've definitely got the means and opportunity," Jordan said. "Kate also worked here and could have been down here at any time," I added. "But she does have a crush on Milo. She'd want Penelope out of the way." The sheriff sighed. "All right. Thank you two for your time. I'm sorry for being so rude yesterday and earlier today. Having a murder take place in my town has shaken me up." "That's understandable," Jordan said. "Let us know if there's anything else we can do to help. Our plans were to stay another day or two, but we can extend our time in Cottonwood if needed." "Thanks. I appreciate that." As we trotted up the stairs, I felt good with the way the investigation was going. I smiled and waved at the grimacing Helen and Harrison, and I hoped that one day I'd be reading about one or both of them rotting in prison. No one was above the law, including the people who heavily donated to the sheriff's department. "Have a beautiful day," I called, giving them a wave. Both sneered at me in return. "Trying to kill them with kindness?" Jordan asked, chuckling once we were outside. "They really are horrible," I replied. "It's such a disappointment when people don't live up to expectations." Chapter 11. "So where to now?" Jordan asked as we trotted down the stairs for the last time. If I never saw the Chases again, I'd be a happy person. "Let's find some clothes," I said. We returned to the car and began our drive out of Old Cottonwood. My phone told me there was a mall a few miles away in what I guessed to be the part of town the citizens lived in, not the tourist traps. "Before we leave town, we should eat there," I said, tapping the passenger window. An old-fashioned gas station with a diner sat on the side of the road, along with a blue '57 Chevy parked in front. The building had been painted red with chrome trimmings, and I'd read they had the best milkshakes this side of the Rockies. We'll do that. It will be nice to get back to experiencing vacation, instead of trying to solve a murder. Do you think the sheriff will be able to put the pieces together and figure out who killed Penelope? I asked. Jordan shrugged. I don't know. I hope so, but I don't have a lot of faith. Maybe we should dig a little deeper and try to find the killer ourselves. This isn't our circus, Sam. We have to step back into the bleachers and become audience members. I only wanted to get involved because I was afraid you were the target. Of course, he was right. I wasn't the intended mark, so there wasn't any reason for me to poke around any longer. But I was still curious. Which clue or clues had I found that would lead Michaels to the killer? When we pulled into the mall parking lot, it felt as if we'd gone back in time. I don't think this place has been updated since the 90s, Jordan said. Let's hope the clothing has. I look terrible in low-rise skinny jeans. As we grabbed some clothes from the department stores, something niggled in the back of my brain. Yes, it had to do with Penelope's murder, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Buried deep in my subconscious, the piece of information simply wouldn't come to the surface. You've been staring at that blouse for a few minutes, Sam, Jordan said. I'm going to spare you the decision. It's ugly. I glanced up at him, and back at the garment in my hand. The brown and yellow paisley print was indeed awful. That may have been on the rack since the 70s, he continued. Agreed, I said, slipping the blouse back onto the display. I'm having trouble concentrating. He furrowed his brow. Why? I feel like we're missing something. I shook my head, then tapped my forehead. It's right here, but I can't shake it loose. What do you think it is? What did we overlook? I just told you I don't know, Jordan, I replied, sighing. What part of my answer hadn't he understood? Right? Well, if you're looking for advice, try not to think about it. Stuff always comes to me when I'm not forcing it. A watch pot never boils. Maybe if I banged my head against the clothing rack, I'd shake the information free. Are you ready, or did you want to try on the blouse? Jordan asked, smirking. No. Let's go. I've got enough to get us through the rest of the trip. After we paid for our clothing, we walked out of the mall and loaded everything into the trunk. Then, we made our way back to Old Cottonwood. When did you want to leave town? Jordan asked. I'd really like to visit the bookstore before we go. If it's not closed today, then we can go there now and leave in the morning. If it is closed, then I'd like to go before we take off. Fair enough. Let's park the car at our hotel and go take a look. Back in Old Cottonwood, we parked our vehicle at the hotel, then headed for the bookstore. Some of the shops were getting ready to close, others had called it quits for the day. The restaurants were packed with people. We should also stop and eat, I said, my stomach growling. I'd like a decent meal. I agree. Did you want to hit the malt shop we drove by? Maybe the Italian joint? I nodded. All of it sounds good. I'll let you choose. We strolled into Books in the Nook. Just as I'd hoped, it was packed to the brim with new and used books. The smell of old paper engulfed us, and I smiled. Can I help you find anything? The elderly woman at the counter asked. Short with long gray hair, her blue eyes twinkled as she smiled, reminding me of a wise old forest elf one would read about in a fantasy novel. I shook my head. No, thank you. We're just looking. Let me know if there's something in particular you're searching for, dear. Thank you. Tracing my fingers over the book spines as I slowly walked down the aisles, I searched the titles. Reading was a renewed love for me. When I was young and living in Oakland with my alcoholic mother, I'd escaped through books. After becoming famous, I hadn't had time to read. Instead, I'd learned scripts. While living in Haywood, I read for education because I'd had no idea how to run a business, let alone an herbal apothecary. Now I picked up books for pleasure. I found I could enjoy just about any genre, except horror and heavy romance. What do I feel like reading today? I whispered. I found a thriller and 2 rom-coms. Jordan had discovered a recliner in a reading nook and waited patiently while flipping through a men's magazine. With his strong jawline and salt and pepper hair, he could easily serve as a cover model, even in his jeans and Arizona State University hoodie. I passed by the kids section, and a pang of longing smacked me right in the gut. Sometimes I wished I'd had children, other times I was glad I didn't. My own mother hadn't exactly been a stellar example of motherly love, so I'd been afraid to step into the role. I'd also been horribly busy building my Hollywood career, oftentimes referring to it as my child. Looking back, I realized that I didn't have children because of fear. Fear of me not being equipped to be a decent mother, and fear that it would ruin my career. I'd been so self-centered. Or maybe, after the childhood I'd experienced, it had been self-preservation. But just because I hadn't had children, didn't mean I couldn't do my part to help raise the ones who did exist. Kids who had horrible childhoods like mine. I turned and walked up to the counter. "Is there a woman's shelter here in town?" "There sure is," the elderly woman stated. "But they don't make it public. Don't want the men to find out where the women have escaped to." "Of course. Is there a drop-off point where I could make donations?" "Yes. It's a thrift shop. It's where they take the women and kids to get clothes, toys and other necessities after they've left their spouses and boyfriends. A place to help them get back on their feet." As she gave me directions, I committed them to memory. It didn't sound far, so I figured I could get us there. "Thank you," I said. "I'll be back in a minute." After returning to the children's section, I studied each book carefully. I chose books about a mother's love and some silly stories. One book in particular caught my eye, and I read it from beginning to end. It was a tale of a brown bear cub who was afraid of the big, dark forest, and his mama bear promising to protect him at all costs. She stood on her hind legs and showed the cub how scary she could be. Then she pointed out her enormous claws and huge teeth. In the end, she wrapped him up in her arms and held him close as they lay together under a tree, the moonlight showering them, telling her cub that mama bears will do anything to protect their babies. As my eyes welled, I sighed. Such a sweet story, and a perfect one for a mother on the run with her children. I grabbed 24 miscellaneous tomes and a few copies of the Mama Bear book and brought them to the counter. The elderly woman was thrilled at the huge sale. I could go home and have a margarita or two. No need to stay open. We laughed as we chatted, and after being elbow-deep in a murder investigation, I got the warm and fuzzies, helping not only the shop owner, but the women and kids who would benefit from my purchase. Next stop, I'd grab some diaper packs and baby formula. Jordan went to retrieve the car we'd left at the hotel, and we loaded up the trunk with my donations. Then we headed to the store to buy the diapers and formula. After Jordan and I had gathered all our contributions, we went to the thrift shop located in an older strip mall. We were met with many smiles and warm thank yous for the gifts. Before we left, I glanced once more at the book about the mama bear and the cub. Such a sweet tale. My smile slowly faded as my heart thundered and sweat dotted my brow. I picked up the book with shaky hands and slowly flipped through the pages. "Sam?" Jordan placed his hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay? You look like you're going to be sick." I shook my head. "I might vomit right here on this floor." "Why? What's happening?" I set down the book and took a deep breath. Placing my hands on my hips, I turned to Jordan. "I just figured out who killed Penelope." He furrowed his brow. "You did? Who? How did you do that?" "Let's go," I muttered. "Someone has a lot of explaining to do." Chapter 12. As Jordan drove, I explained my theory. He remained quiet while the words tumbled from my mouth. Excited butterflies tickled my belly, overtaking my initial feeling of wanting to vomit while I pieced it together. It all made perfect sense to me. "I don't know, Sam," Jordan said, shaking his head. "Go through it again, this time slowly. Your thoughts are jumping around like a rabbit on crack." He wasn't wrong. After taking a deep breath, I began again. Brenda took Milo under her wing when his parents died. Correct? She admitted she didn't like Penelope. A lot of people have admitted they didn't like Penelope, Jordan said. And it seems there were a lot of reasons not to like her. That's why there are so many suspects. I know. I sighed and stared at the building in front of me. Let's go ask her. I slid from the car before he could answer. No way would he allow me to confront a killer alone. A moment later, I heard the car door slam behind me while Jordan grumbled under his breath. Sam, we should get this figured out before we start accusing her, Jordan said as he caught up with me. I'm not going to accuse her of anything, I said. I'm just going to ask questions. With a smile, I pulled open the door to Sweet Scoops. Brenda stood behind the counter and I waved. You're back, she said. Are you buying something this time, or fishing around for more information? I'll take a chocolate chip on a cone, I said, then I nudged Jordan in the ribs. And I'll have the same, he said, flashing his best George Clooney grin as he slid his phone into his pocket. Once the ice cream cones were in our hands, I did indeed start fishing around for more information. Can you tell me if Milo was here the day Penelope was killed? I asked. He was working here with me. That's one reason I knew that your theory of him being the killer was wrong. Did Milo spend a lot of time on social media that day? I asked. The color drained from Brenda's face, and a vein popped in her neck as she swallowed. She wore a skin-tight t-shirt showing off her lithe, strong body, strong enough to push the barrels and crush Penelope. Recovering quickly, she grinned. How would I know if he was on social media? I smiled. Maybe because he was here with you, and you saw him scrolling Instagram? Maybe he showed you a picture of me and Penelope together? Or he was here and his phone went off, and you saw a message? Jordan offered. Even though he doubted my theory, I appreciated the support. I think you two need to leave, Brenda said, shaking her head. You aren't making any sense. I think we're going to keep talking, I said, then I took a lick of my ice cream. Then I'll call the police, Brenda shot back. Go ahead. I shrugged. He wants to find out who killed Penelope as well, so he may be interested in this conversation. You're out of your mind, Brenda muttered. Let me tell you my theory, I said. I think you'll find it interesting. I've got things to do, and I don't have time to listen to fairy tales. Get out of my store. Brenda, I think you killed Penelope, I said, ignoring her directive. Her mouth fell. Narrowing my gaze, I studied her carefully. As her face flushed and little droplets of sweat appeared on her upper lip, I knew no matter what she said next, she would be lying. That's ridiculous. Her voice had also lost some of its bluster. I don't think so, I replied. I'm going to tell you the facts. Of course, there are a few holes that need to be filled in, but I'm sure they will be in time. First, you mentioned to me that you're a mama bear for poor Milo, whose brains have been fried by the meth fumes he grew up on. I'm trying to keep a nice boy from being taken advantage of by a mean world, she said through gritted teeth. I don't doubt that, I said. But maybe you took things a little too far? Her jaw worked as she stared at me silently. I continued, you see, here's what I think happened. You do have Milo's best interests at heart. Penelope, though, didn't. She'd heard about Milo's parents stashing a bunch of cash somewhere before they died. You wondered what her angle was in dating him, and based on Penelope's history with everyone we've spoken with, it was the money. Money? Brenda yelled, then threw her head back and laughed. They were meth heads. There wasn't any money. I shrugged. Someone thought there was, and rumors started. Poor Milo thought he'd hit the jackpot when Penelope started taking an interest in him, Jordan said. He even quit his job at the winery. And he was so afraid by the Chase's reaction, he ran out with the keys, I added. Which you didn't return for a few days. Perhaps you made a copy with the intent of somehow getting back at Helen and Harrison for the way they treated Milo after he told them he was leaving? Lying in wait for the perfect time, Jordan said sarcastically. I do appreciate your patience. It's an excellent trait to have, especially if you want to kill someone. Here's my guess on what happened that day, I said. Milo was here with you. He was scrolling through social media and found Penelope had tagged him. I know he saw the posts because he actually commented with a thumbs up. Penelope had taken a lot of selfies with Sam, Jordan said. She posted them and tagged Milo, which was mean by any standards. When Milo saw those pictures, he became quite upset, I said. You have no proof, Brenda said, shaking her head. That all sounds like something out of your stupid soap opera. A lot of those plot lines were taken directly from the headlines. I shrugged. With a little added flourish, of course. We've seen Milo get upset, Jordan said. We've seen him go from 0 to 100 in seconds, over unimportant things. We think he did that when he saw the pictures of Sam and Penelope. She stared at us, her gaze filled with hate. Another mask was slipping. I continued to push. As I was saying, Milo saw the pictures and became very upset. According to Penelope, my character was the one who'd given her the strength to leave Milo, but I'm doubting that now. I think she left him because he wasn't coughing up any of this money she'd heard about. Anyway, he became so upset, you decided it was time to put an end to Penelope and her torture of Milo. You had the key to the winery, Jordan said. You walked over and used your key at the back door, which led directly to the basement. And then you climbed the barrels and waited. In the social media post, Penelope had said she was going to give us a tour of the inner workings of the winery. The basement area is just that, as you're well aware. You waited until you heard us coming down. If Sam hadn't insisted on drinking her wine instead of starting the tour right away, you may have missed us, Jordan added, shaking his head. Luck was on your side that day, Brenda. I can see from here that you're very strong, I said. Pushing those barrels wouldn't have been easy, but you have the power. And hiding in plain sight in the spot by the staircase leading to the outside? Jordan shook his head. I have to say, I'm really impressed. Brilliant, Brenda. I wasn't sure if he meant what he was saying, or if he was just trying to lower her defenses. Although I did have to admit, she'd executed the plan flawlessly, if we were right. Deep in my gut, I was quite certain we had her nailed to the wall, I just lacked the evidence. All of that could be gathered, though. You two are out of your minds, Brenda said, chuckling. Get out of my store. Call the police, Jordan said, shrugging. It will save us the trip of going to speak to the sheriff after we're done here. A standoff had ensued, and I hoped she didn't have a weapon behind the counter. If she pulled something out, I'd throw my ice cream cone at her, and maybe one of the glass jars to my right that contained some candy. Jordan would have to be the hero and subdue her. Just then, the door opened and the three of us turned. Milo had entered the melee. Milo, Jordan greeted him, placing his arm over his shoulder. The young man stared at us wide-eyed, then his gaze slid over to Brenda. What's going on? He stuttered. We're just talking to Brenda, Jordan said. Can we ask you a few questions too? Brenda glared at him and gave her head the slightest shake. Jordan maneuvered him so he couldn't look directly at her, but instead, he was face to face with me with his back to Brenda. Hi Milo, I said, smiling. The day Penelope died, were you here with Brenda? He nodded slowly as Brenda yelled, You don't have to answer any of their questions. Did Penelope's social media posts upset you? I continued, as the woman walked around the counter. Yes, he said. It was like she was teasing me. I'm glad she's dead now. Although I'd read the text he'd sent to Kate that stated the same thing, his bluntness stunned me. Maybe we were looking at the wrong person? Perhaps Milo had gone to the winery and killed Penelope in revenge? But as I stared at him, his eyes darting all over the store, I didn't think that was the case. Did Brenda leave the store when you were upset? Jordan asked. Milo nodded. When Brenda pushed me away from him, I knew we had the correct killer. Milo may have hated Penelope, but I didn't think he had the wherewithal to murder her. "Hey!" I yelled. "Don't you lay your hands on me." "Get out of my store," she screamed. "Leave us alone." Jordan stepped between us. Everyone calmed down. There's no reason for adults to be screaming and yelling like a bunch of toddlers. I almost yelled. She pushed me, but then I realized how far into that toddler role I'd be. Instead, I took a deep breath and squared my shoulders while Brenda glared at me. My heart thundered with anger while my palms nervously sweated. "Now, Milo, I'm not done asking you questions," Jordan said. "Yes, you are," Brenda screamed. "Get out of my store." Milo's gaze jumped from Brenda to Jordan. "Look at me, son," Jordan said softly. "Just because she's yelling doesn't mean you have to pay attention to her. You and I can have a conversation." The door opened, and we all turned to see Sheriff Michaels strolling in. Was this a coincidence that he walked into Sweet Scoops at this intense moment? "Brenda, I'm going to have to arrest you," he said. "I didn't kill Penelope." She threw her hands up in the air, her face the color of apples. "We'll see about that, but you did destroy the hotel room over at Quaint Corner. I've got you on film." The color drained from her cheeks. "I guess you didn't see the cameras on your destruction spree?" Michaels asked. Having forgotten about the hotel room melee, I gasped. Of course, it all made even more sense now. She'd given us a warning after we came into Sweet Scoops, to ask about Milo and Penelope. She'd been trying to scare us out of town. "Brenda?" Milo had tears in his eyes as the sheriff put handcuffs on her. "What's going on?" Her shoulders sagged and she shook her head. "Just remember that I love you, Milo. You're a good kid." I was still in shock that the sheriff had shown up when he had. How did he know to be here? I asked Jordan as Michaels led her outside. He pulled out his phone and grinned. "I figured if you were right, Brenda would be very upset, so I called him before we came in. He's been listening the whole time." Chapter 13. We hung around Cottonwood for a couple of days, but the town had lost its luster. Murder had a way of tainting experiences, taking them from great to completely unenjoyable. Sheriff Michaels finally got a confession from Brenda, and we'd been right about everything. For evidence, he was able to match her shoe print to dust on top of the remaining stacked barrels, as well as on the dirt path leading up to the door behind the winery. We'd also discovered that the bandage she wore on her hand covered a gash in her palm she'd obtained while on the barrels, and a blood sample confirmed it. "They have everything they need," Jordan said as we enjoyed a burger and fries at the old-fashioned malt shop. The inside was filled with red leather seating, black and white pictures of past Cottonwood, and a lot of very hungry people. "They've got her dead to rights." "I feel bad for Milo," I replied. "I feel like he needs someone in his life to guide him." Jordan nodded as he inspected his burger. "Hopefully, no one else takes advantage of him." Kate came to mind. Was she after the mysterious money Milo supposedly had, or were her intentions pure? I supposed we'd never know, unless we stayed in town. However, I was ready to move on. We ate the rest of our meal in silence. "Do you think we should stay one more night, or should we head out?" Jordan asked. "Let's go back to Haywood, gather our beach clothes, and book a flight to Mexico." "I thought you wanted to see everything between California and New York." "At some point, but after what we've been through, I was thinking about a relaxing vacation on a beach in Cancun. Sun, surf, fruity drinks with umbrellas. You get the idea." Jordan nodded. "I most certainly do. A lounge chair and margarita sound pretty darn great." I was thrilled he was on board with my idea. It was exactly what we needed to decompress. What could go wrong on a beach vacation? To find out, grab Homicide at the hotel at your favorite retailer or direct from me. If you'd like to read more about Sam and Jordan and their adventures outside of their vacation travels, you can check out the Haywood Herbalist Cozy Mysteries, available at all ebook outlets. Book 1, Herbs and Homicide is available at all retail outlets.